Yo, what's up? Welcome to Bender, where stories come alive. Buckle up because today we have what if Harry escaped to Durmstrang at age 8 and returned to Hogwarts as a master of dark arts. Quick favor, if you dig this content, drop a like and subscribe. It takes just a second but means so much to us. Let's roll. Chapter 1, The Prodigal Son. The night was unseasonably cold for July, a biting wind lashing against the pristine houses of Privet Drive. In the smallest bedroom of number 4, an 8-year-old Harry Potter pressed his bleeding lip against his sleeve, stifling any sound that might alert his uncle to his consciousness. His glasses lay broken on the floor, snapped cleanly at the bridge, the third pair this year. Worthless, he whispered to himself, recalling Uncle Vernon's favorite descriptor. His fingers trembled as he reached beneath the loose floorboard under his bed, extracting a crumpled photo he'd stolen from the living room bin, his mother and father, their faces smiling up at him, unaware of their fates. Something hot and fierce rose in Harry's chest. The strange occurrences had been happening more frequently lately. Yesterday, Dudley's new television had exploded when his cousin had boasted about getting Harry's portion of dinner. The week before, Mrs. Landry had found herself inexplicably stuck to her chair after sending Harry to the headmaster's office for suspicious behavior. Uncle Vernon had known somehow. Had connected these events to Harry, despite his protests of innocence. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Harry tensed, holding his breath. The heavy footsteps paused outside his door, and Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. The lock rattled. He was coming back. No, Harry whispered, clutching the photo tightly. No more. The doorknob turned, and something broke inside him, like a dam bursting. The door blasted off its hinges with a thunderous crack, slamming into his uncle and sending him sprawling backward into the opposite wall. The house lights flickered and died. Picture frames crashed down. A vase of petunias exploded in the hallway. Harry didn't wait. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed his pitiful bundle of belongings, and raced down the stairs, leaping over the moaning form of his uncle. The front door swung open of its own accord, and Harry fled into the night, no destination in mind except away. He ran until his lungs burned, stumbling through residential streets until he reached a small park. Collapsing onto a bench, Harry finally allowed himself to sob, the reality of what he'd done crashing down on him. Where would he go? How would he live? Most impressive, young man. Harry jerked upright, scrubbing tears from his face. A tall man in peculiar clothes stood before him, his silver-streaked beard coming to a point above a heavy fur-lined cloak that seemed absurdly out of place in summer. His eyes were dark and calculating, measuring Harry with unnerving intensity. Who are you? Harry demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. My name is Igor Karkaroff, the man replied with a slight accent Harry couldn't place. And you, I believe, are Harry Potter. Harry tensed, ready to flee again. How do you know my name? Karkaroff's lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. Everyone in our world knows your name, boy. The child who vanquished the Dark Lord. He tilted his head. Though they might be disappointed to find you cowering in a Muggle park. Muggle? Non-magical folk. Karkaroff gestured dismissively toward the darkened houses. Like those creatures who raised you so, inadequately. Harry's mind raced. Magic? You mean, what I can do, it's magic. Of course it is. Did those Muggles tell you nothing? When Harry shook his head, Karkaroff's expression darkened. Deplorable. The greatest magical achievement of our time, and you were left ignorant of your heritage. My parents, Harry whispered. They had magic too. Indeed. Your father came from an ancient magical lineage. Your mother was, surprisingly talented, despite her origins. Harry clutched his photo tighter. And that's why they were killed. Not a car crash. Karkaroff's eyebrows shot up. Is that the fiction you were told? He laughed, a cold sound without humor. No, child. They were murdered by the most powerful dark wizard of our age, who then tried to kill you, and mysteriously failed. His eyes traveled to Harry's forehead, to the lightning scar partially hidden beneath unruly hair. What happens to me now? Harry asked, suddenly aware of how cold the night had grown. Karkaroff considered him for a long moment. That depends, he said finally. There are those who placed you with those muggles, who would return you there. There are magical authorities who would place you with another family, but still control your destiny. And you? I am the headmaster of Durmstrang Institute, Karkaroff said. A school where young wizards learn to harness their power without the limitations imposed by British magical education. You take me there. It would be unconventional. You are young yet, and British. Karkaroff circled Harry, examining him like a curiosity. But I sense great potential in you. Raw, untamed, but potentially magnificent. Harry stood straighter. I don't want to go back. Ever. There would be conditions, Karkaroff warned. Your training would be rigorous, demanding. We do not coddle students at Durmstrang. I don't want to be coddled, Harry said fiercely. I want to learn everything. Something like hunger flashed in Karkaroff's eyes. Everything, child. Even what your British ministry classifies as dark arts. Harry thought of his uncle's face contorted with rage, of years of neglect and casual cruelty. Everything, he repeated firmly. I want to be powerful enough that no one can hurt me again. Karkaroff extended a hand. Then come, Harry Potter. Your real education begins tonight. Harry hesitated only a moment before taking the offered hand. The world compressed around him, darkness squeezing his lungs as they disappeared with a sharp crack, leaving behind only the echo of childish weeping on the night breeze. 6 years later the Durmstrang ship broke the surface of the Black Lake with a massive surge, water cascading from its ornately carved hull. A cheer rose from the assembled Hogwarts students lining the shore, their breath fogging in the crisp October air. Fleur Delacour, standing with the already arrived Beauxbatons delegation, wrinkled her perfect nose at the dramatic entrance. Show-offs, she murmured to a classmate. Inside the ship's main cabin, 16-year-old Harry Potter checked his reflection one final time. The blood-red uniform of Durmstrang fit his frame perfectly, accentuating the lean muscle built through years of physical training. Gone was the scrawny, frightened child. In his place stood a young man whose emerald eyes held a watchful intensity that made most people uncomfortable after prolonged contact. It is not too late to change your mind, Viktor Krum said in Bulgarian, adjusting his own uniform beside Harry. Karkaroff would not force you. Harry smiled thinly. Worried about sharing the spotlight, Viktor? The Bulgarian seeker snorted. I welcome it. Let them fawn over you for a change. They won't be fawning, Harry replied, his Bulgarian fluent but still tinged with British undertones. Not once they know who I am. You exaggerate your infamy, Viktor said, clapping him on the shoulder. Besides, half of them will not believe it is you. Not until you show them that. He tapped his own forehead, indicating Harry's scar. Then let's not keep them waiting. Harry pulled on the fur-lined cloak that completed the Durmstrang uniform, effectively hiding the wand holsters strapped to both forearms. A third wand, his original holly and phoenix feather, remained concealed in a holster against his spine, a precaution Durmstrang's combat instructors had drilled into him. Always have a weapon they don't know about. The Durmstrang students disembarked in perfect formation, their synchronous movements a testament to the military discipline that underscored their education. Karkaroff led the procession, his face a careful mask of diplomatic cordiality that Harry knew concealed calculating ambition. Harry kept his eyes forward as they marched toward the castle, though his peripheral awareness, honed through countless ambush drills, catalogued the details of Hogwarts. The castle was impressive, he had to admit. Where Durmstrang was a fortress carved into northern mountains, Hogwarts seemed to have grown organically from the Scottish landscape, its towers reaching skyward with an almost whimsical defiance of architectural limitations. A tall, silver-bearded figure in midnight blue robes awaited them at the entrance. Even without the countless descriptions he'd heard over the years, Harry would have recognized Albus Dumbledore. Power radiated from the old wizard, a subtle pressure against Harry's magical senses that spoke of capabilities far beyond the twinkling grandfatherly facade. "This is the man who left you with the Dursleys," a voice whispered in Harry's mind. "The man who never checked on you. Who never came looking when you vanished." Harry quieted his thoughts. He had prepared for this moment for years. Revenge, if it came, would be a dish served with precise timing, not with the impulsive heat of a child's anger. "Igor," Dumbledore greeted warmly, extending his hands. "Welcome to Hogwarts." "Albus," Karkaroff replied, his smile not reaching his eyes as they briefly clasped hands. "My students are honored to participate in this historic tournament. And we are delighted to host you." Dumbledore's gaze swept over the Durmstrang delegation, momentarily pausing on Victor before continuing down the line. When his eyes reached Harry, they stopped, widening almost imperceptibly. "He recognizes me," Harry thought. Despite everything. Dumbledore's composure returned instantly, but Harry had caught the momentary shock. Satisfaction curled through him. First blood drawn, and he hadn't even spoken a word. "Please," Dumbledore said, his voice betraying nothing, "come inside out of the cold. The feast awaits." Karkaroff nodded sharply, and the Durmstrang students followed him into the entrance hall. As they passed Dumbledore, Harry felt the brush of legitimacy against his mental defenses, gentle, probing, but unmistakable. Harry allowed a single thought to slip through his otherwise impenetrable shields, that was rude, headmaster. He caught the slight stiffening of Dumbledore's shoulders and permitted himself a small, cold smile as he continued into the Great Hall. The Hogwarts students watched with undisguised curiosity as the Durmstrang delegation entered. Harry heard the excited whispers as people recognized Victor Krum, the Quidditch star. Several girls giggled behind their hands. A red-headed boy at the Gryffindor table looked like he might faint from excitement. Karkaroff guided them toward the Slytherin table, where students eagerly made space. Harry sat between Victor and another Durmstrang 7th year named Poliakoff, positioning himself to view the entire hall while keeping his back to a wall, another habit instilled by years of combat training. Across from him, a blonde Slytherin girl with startlingly intelligent blue eyes studied him with more subtlety than her housemates. Unlike the others, her gaze wasn't fixed on his scar or comparing his features to old prophet photographs. She seemed to be assessing him, the actual person beneath the name. "You're him, aren't you?" she asked quietly as the hall filled with chatter around them. "Harry Potter." Harry raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Daphne Greengrass," she replied, offering no hand to shake, appropriate, given the formal circumstances. "Your disappearance caused quite the uproar years ago. The prophet ran stories for months." "Did they?" Harry asked with deliberate casualness. "I wouldn't know. We don't get British papers at Durmstrang." "They called it, 'The Boy Who Lived Then Vanished,'" she continued, her tone neutral. "Some said you'd been kidnapped by remaining Death Eaters. Others claimed Dumbledore had hidden you away for special training." Harry's lips quirked. "People do love their theories. Especially when no one provides facts," she countered smoothly. Before Harry could respond, Dumbledore rose to formally welcome the visiting schools. Harry noted how the headmaster carefully avoided looking in his direction, though several of the staff at the head table were now openly staring, whispering urgently to each other. A severe-looking witch in emerald robes, McGonagall, he presumed from descriptions, had gone completely pale. Beside her, a hook-nosed man with lank black hair studied Harry with such intensity that Harry reinforced his occlumency shields as a precaution. Severus Snape, he identified. Former Death Eater turned Dumbledore's man. Or so he'd have everyone believe. Word was spreading rapidly through the hall. Students craned their necks, pointing, whispering his name with increasing volume. The red-headed boy who'd been excited about Krum now gaped at Harry with a mixture of awe and confusion. Dumbledore concluded his speech, presenting Bartemius Crouch and Ludo Bagman, who would oversee the tournament. Throughout their explanations of rules and procedures, the buzzing undercurrent of whispers continued to grow, until finally Dumbledore unveiled the Goblet of Fire. Anyone wishing to submit themselves as champion must write their name and school upon a slip of parchment and drop it into the goblet, Dumbledore explained. Tomorrow night, Halloween, the goblet will return the names of the 3 it has judged most worthy to represent their schools. His eyes finally met Harry's directly. I will be drawing an age line around the Goblet of Fire to ensure that no underage student yields to temptation. Harry held the headmaster's gaze impassively. The implication was clear: regardless of where he'd spent the last 6 years, Dumbledore considered him bound by Hogwarts rules while on their grounds. Karkaroff's hand landed heavily on Harry's shoulder. Fortunately, the Durmstrang headmaster said loudly enough to carry, international magical law is quite clear on matters of educational jurisdiction. Mr. Potter has been legally enrolled at Durmstrang Institute since he was 9 years old, with complete magical guardianship transferred to our institution. Murmurs erupted across the hall. Dumbledore's expression remained placid, though Harry detected a tightening around his eyes. We will discuss such matters after the feast, Igor, Dumbledore said pleasantly. Karkaroff's grip tightened briefly on Harry's shoulder before releasing. Indeed we shall, Albus. As the feast appeared on the tables, the whispers exploded into open conversation. Students from all houses kept sneaking glances at Harry, some boldly staring. He ate methodically, maintaining casual conversation with the Durmstrang students while ignoring the spectacle he'd become. So, Daphne said after several minutes of observation, why return now? You could have stayed hidden at Durmstrang indefinitely. Harry took a sip of pumpkin juice, finding it cloyingly sweet compared to the robust drink served at Durmstrang. Who says I was hiding? 8 years of complete disappearance suggests a deliberate choice, she replied. Perhaps, Harry conceded, but circumstances change. Opportunities arise. Like the Triwizard Tournament. Among other things. Harry studied her more carefully. Unlike her housemates, who radiated either hostility or calculating interest, Daphne Greengrass seemed genuinely curious. Your family maintains neutrality in British wizarding politics, correct? Neither aligned with Dumbledore nor with pure-blood supremacists. Surprise flashed briefly in her eyes. You've done your research. Knowledge is survival, Harry replied simply. Especially when returning to a world that has expectations of you. And do you plan to meet those expectations, Potter? A drawling voice interrupted. Harry turned to face a pale, pointed-faced boy with slicked-back platinum hair, flanked by 2 larger students with the distinct look of trained muscle. I don't believe we've been introduced, Harry said coolly. Draco Malfoy, the boy replied, an edge of superiority in his tone. My father has significant influence in the ministry. He'll be very interested to learn Harry Potter has been at Durmstrang all this time. I'm sure news travels fast, Harry replied with deliberate indifference. Though I'd have thought Lucius Malfoy would have more pressing concerns than my educational choices. Malfoy's eyes narrowed at the casual use of his father's first name. Everyone has wondered where the boy who lived disappeared to. Some say you've been learning dark magic. His voice dropped to a staged whisper on the last words. Harry smiled thinly. And what exactly is dark magic, Malfoy? Your ministry's arbitrary classification system. Magic is intent and power, nothing more, nothing less. So you admit it, Malfoy pressed, looking triumphant. I admit nothing except the narrowness of British magical education, Harry replied. At Durmstrang, we're taught to understand magic in all its forms, not fear it. Before Malfoy could respond, a commotion at the head table drew their attention. A wizard with a heavily scarred face and a revolving magical eye had entered through a side door and was engaged in intense conversation with Dumbledore. The strange eye swiveled independently, scanning the hall until it locked onto Harry with unsettling focus. Mad-Eye Moody, Daphne supplied, following Harry's gaze. Former Auror. Dumbledore hired him as defense professor this year. Harry tensed imperceptibly. Alastor Moody, the legendary dark wizard catcher who'd filled half of Azkaban's cells. His presence was an unexpected complication. As the feast concluded, Dumbledore rose again. It is growing late, and I know how important it is to you all to be alert and rested for your lessons tomorrow. Bedtime. Chop chop. Karkaroff immediately stood. Come, he said to his students, back to the ship. As the Durmstrang students rose in unison, Dumbledore approached with McGonagall and a portly man in a lime green bowler hat at his side. Igor, Dumbledore said pleasantly, before you depart, I believe we should have that discussion regarding young Mr. Potter. Perhaps in my office? Karkaroff's smile was shark-like. Of course, Albus. Mr. Potter will accompany us, naturally, as this concerns him directly. The man in the bowler hat puffed up importantly. Now see here, I am Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, and I must insist, Minister, Harry interrupted smoothly, stepping forward and offering a respectful nod rather than a handshake, an honor to meet you. However, as Headmaster Karkaroff has indicated, my legal magical guardianship was transferred to Durmstrang Institute years ago. Any discussion of my status should include Durmstrang's international legal attaché, who remains aboard our vessel. Fudge blinked, clearly thrown by Harry's polished diplomacy. Well, that is, a sensible precaution, Dumbledore agreed, his eyes twinkling though they held a calculating edge. Perhaps we could reconvene tomorrow with all relevant parties present. This would give us time to contact the Department of International Magical Cooperation. Acceptable, Karkaroff said after a moment. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Dumbledore nodded. My office. The password is Acid Pops. As they turned to leave, a burly Gryffindor boy with red hair pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with excitement. Harry. Harry Potter. It's really you. Harry assessed him quickly, no visible wand, posture non-threatening, though the abrupt approach triggered his combat instincts. Yes. I'm Ron Weasley, the boy said breathlessly. Did you really go to Durmstrang? What's it like? Do they actually teach the dark arts? Can you show us something? Several students had gathered around, all watching Harry with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. Harry noticed Moody's magical eye fixed on him from across the hall. Mr. Weasley, Harry said with careful neutrality, Durmstrang's curriculum is comprehensive. We learn to understand magic in its entirety, not divided into artificial categories of light and dark. But can you show us something? Weasley pressed eagerly. Something they taught you there. Harry felt Karkaroff's warning hand on his shoulder, but another voice cut through the crowd. Leave him alone, Weasley, Daphne said coolly. He's not a performing monkey. Stay out of this, Greengrass, Weasley snapped. Just because you snakes got him at your table, it's fine, Harry interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. If you want a demonstration. Before anyone could react, Harry's right hand flicked subtly. Every candle in the great hall dimmed simultaneously, plunging the space into twilight darkness. Then, with a controlled gesture of his left hand, he conjured a sphere of cold blue flame that hovered above his palm, casting eerie shadows across the assembled faces. Students gasped. The flame reflected in their wide eyes as it morphed, taking the form of a miniature Hungarian horntail dragon that circled Harry's head before dissolving into sparks that rained down, disappearing before touching anyone. The candles blazed back to full brightness. Wandless magic, someone whispered. Did you see how fast he moved? That wasn't just a Lumos. Harry met Dumbledore's gaze across the hall, noting the concern beneath the headmaster's composed expression. Beside him, McGonagall looked deeply troubled, while Moody's magical eye had narrowed to a slit. Satisfied, Mr. Weasley? Harry asked quietly. The redhead nodded, speechless. Then if you'll excuse us, Harry continued, it's been a long journey. Good evening. As the Durmstrang delegation moved toward the exit, Harry sensed a magical pulse, subtle, nearly undetectable, but unmistakably a tracking charm attempting to attach to his cloak. Without breaking stride, he flicked his fingers in a minute gesture, silently deflecting the charm back toward its caster. He didn't turn to see who had cast it. He didn't need to. The sharp intake of breath from the staff table told him everything he needed to know. First night back in Britain, Harry thought as they strode into the cool evening air, and already the games begin. Sleep eluded Harry that night. The gentle rocking of the Durmstrang ship usually lulled him to slumber, but tonight his mind raced with calculations and contingencies. He rose silently from his bunk, careful not to wake his dorm mates. Retrieving a small obsidian mirror from his trunk, Harry moved to the cabin's single porthole where weak moonlight filtered through. "Aprio nexum," he whispered, tracing runes around the mirror's edge with his fingertip. The obsidian surface rippled like disturbed water, then cleared to reveal a network of shimmering threads, magical connections and monitoring spells stretching from Hogwarts castle to the ship. Most were standard security wards, but 3 lines glowed with distinctive magical signatures, one from Dumbledore, one from the person using Moody's identity. Harry had recognized the magical inconsistency immediately, and one from an unknown source within the castle. Harry had anticipated surveillance, but the intensity of interest exceeded his expectations. He carefully placed the mirror back in his trunk, then silently climbed the steps to the ship's deck. The October air bit with pre-winter chill. Harry leaned against the railing, watching Hogwarts castle illuminated by moonlight. Its reflection wavered in the black lake's surface, creating the illusion of twin castles, one reaching skyward, one descending into depths. Could not sleep. Harry didn't startle at Crumb's voice behind him. Too many eyes watching. Victor joined him at the railing. "Karkaroff is pleased. Your dramatic return has gone exactly as he hoped." "I'm aware I'm his political chess piece," Harry said without rancor. "As long as our interests align, I don't object to being played." "And when they no longer align?" Harry's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then Karkaroff will learn I'm not a pawn." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 students shaped by Durmstrang's harsh philosophies. Finally, Victor spoke again. "The goblet selects tomorrow night. Will you enter?" "Yes," Harry said simply. "You are young for the tournament." "I've been preparing for this opportunity for 3 years, Victor." "Age is irrelevant." Victor nodded. "I will enter as well. If we both become champions, then we compete as Durmstrang taught us," Harry finished. "With respect, skill, and no quarter given." "Agreed." Victor clapped him on the shoulder. "Though I warn you, I will not lose to you simply because you are the famous Harry Potter." Harry laughed softly. "I would be insulted if you did." As Victor returned below deck, Harry remained, watching the castle. Somewhere within those walls were people who had shaped his destiny without his consent, who had placed him with abusive relatives, who had never searched for him when he vanished, who now sought to reclaim control over the weapon they'd forged and lost. "Too late," Harry murmured to the night. "Far too late." The next morning brought clear autumn skies and political maneuvering. Harry entered Dumbledore's office flanked by Karkaroff and Durmstrang's legal attaché, a stern witch named Natalia Petrova whose reputation for ruthlessness in international magical law had earned her the nickname, the Siberian Viper. Dumbledore welcomed them cordially, offering tea and lemon drops as though this were a casual social visit rather than a power struggle for control of the boy who lived. Fudge fidgeted nervously in his chair while a toad-like woman in pink, introduced as Dolores Umbridge, senior undersecretary, watched Harry with unconcealed suspicion. "Let us address the hippogriff in the room," Dumbledore began after pleasantries had been exchanged. Harry's unexpected appearance with the Durmstrang delegation raises significant questions regarding his legal status. "There are no questions," Petrova responded in accented English, retrieving documents from her leather portfolio. "These papers, certified by the International Confederation of Wizards, establish Durmstrang Institute's educational and guardianship rights over Harry Potter from age 9 onward." "Preposterous!" Umbridge interjected with a girlish giggle that set Harry's teeth on edge. The boy is a British citizen and magical ward. He cannot simply be, perhaps, Karkaroff interrupted smoothly. Madam Umbridge is unfamiliar with Section 16 of the International Magical Minors Protection Act. When a magical child faces documented abuse and neglect, any ICW-accredited magical institution may petition for emergency educational guardianship. Dumbledore's expression tightened marginally. Harry was placed with his relatives for his protection. There were blood wards, which did nothing to protect him from those within the wards, Petrova countered, sliding forward photographs documenting Harry's condition upon arrival at Durmstrang. Malnourishment. Improperly healed bones. Consistent patterns of neglect. Fudge blanched, looking away from the images. Umbridge's lips pressed into a thin line. The British ministry was never notified of these concerns, she said stiffly. Because the British ministry placed him there, Harry spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying an edge that silenced the room. And Headmaster Dumbledore, who arranged that placement, never once checked on my welfare in 8 years. Dumbledore's blue eyes dimmed with what appeared to be genuine regret. Harry, I had monitoring charms, which apparently failed to detect consistent abuse, Harry finished. Curious, for a wizard of your capabilities. An uncomfortable silence fell. Harry kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he savored the slight crack in Dumbledore's composure. This meeting wasn't about changing anyone's mind, it was about establishing boundaries and gathering information. Nevertheless, Fudge blustered, now that Mr. Potter has returned to British soil, surely our laws apply only as specified in the Triwizard Tournament's International Charter, Petrova completed, producing another document. Section 7, Paragraph 4, all participating students remain under the primary jurisdiction of their home institutions for educational, disciplinary, and guardianship matters. This is outrageous, Umbridge simpered. Headmaster Dumbledore, surely you won't allow, I'm afraid, Dolores, Dumbledore interrupted gently, that Madame Petrova is correct regarding the tournament statutes. He turned to Harry, his expression somber. However, Harry, I must express concern about your education at an institution known for its flexible approach to certain magical disciplines. Harry met his gaze steadily. Your concern is noted, Headmaster, but unnecessary. Durmstrang has given me precisely the education I required, comprehensive, practical, and unburdened by arbitrary restrictions. The British ministry classifies certain magics as dark for good reason, Mr. Potter, Umbridge said with forced sweetness. Does it? Harry raised an eyebrow. The same ministry that classified blood magic as dark despite its use in protective wards. The same classification system that would have prevented me from defending myself against Voldemort's return. Fudge choked at the name. Umbridge's face contorted with outrage. How dare you suggest, he who must not be named is dead and gone? Is he? Harry asked quietly. Then I have nothing to fear from the education that prepared me to face him. Dumbledore studied Harry with renewed intensity. You believe Voldemort will return? I know what happened that night in Godric's Hollow better than anyone, Harry replied. And Durmstrang scholars have extensive knowledge of the magics he employed. His defeat was temporary. The implication hung heavy in the air. Harry watched the reactions carefully, Fudge's denial, Umbridge's fury, and most tellingly, Dumbledore's resignation. The old wizard already knew. Well, Dumbledore said finally, breaking the tension, regardless of our differing perspectives, the Triwizard Tournament's rules are clear. Harry remains under Durmstrang's jurisdiction during his stay at Hogwarts. But Albus! Fudge protested. However, Dumbledore continued, eyes fixed on Harry, I would ask that while on Hogwarts grounds, you respect our educational philosophies, Mr. Potter. No unauthorized demonstrations of controversial magic. As long as I'm not provoked, Harry agreed evenly, I have no intention of disrupting Hogwarts' educational environment. The meeting concluded with terse formalities, though Harry felt Dumbledore's eyes follow him as they departed the office. Once they reached the bottom of the spiral staircase, Karkaroff smiled coldly. Perfectly executed, he murmured. Dumbledore backed into a corner by his own tournament rules. For now, Harry cautioned. He'll seek other avenues of influence. Let him try, Petrova said dismissively. The documentation is impeccable. As they crossed the entrance hall, Harry noticed the goblet of fire now stood in the center, surrounded by Dumbledore's age line. Students clustered around it, watching as contenders dropped their names into the blue-white flames. This evening, Karkaroff said, nodding toward the goblet, you will submit your name. Harry nodded. And Victor his. Indeed. Durmstrang will have worthy representation regardless of which of you is chosen. Karkaroff's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I have my preferences. Of course you do, Harry thought but didn't say. As Karkaroff and Petrova continued toward the grounds, Harry lingered, observing the goblet. Its magic pulsed with ancient power, a binding magical artifact whose judgment was final. Planning to enter, Potter? The question came from Daphne Greengrass, who'd approached silently from a side corridor. Perhaps, Harry replied noncommittally. She studied him with those perceptive blue eyes. You know, the last tournament had a death toll. Most worthwhile endeavors carry risk. And what makes this endeavor worthwhile to you? She pressed. Glory? Money? You already have both, if the stories about the Potter vaults are true. Harry considered her question seriously. What do you think drives me, Greengrass? Proving yourself, she answered without hesitation. But to whom? Britain? Dumbledore? The memory of your parents? She shook her head. Or perhaps to yourself? Harry felt a flicker of genuine surprise. Most people projected their assumptions onto him without such insightful analysis. Perceptive, he acknowledged. Though incomplete. Then complete it for me, she challenged. Before Harry could respond, a commotion erupted at the goblet as Fred and George Weasley attempted to cross the age line with aging potions, resulting in spectacular white beards. The distraction drew attention away from their conversation. Another time, perhaps, Harry said. I have preparations to make before this evening. Daphne nodded, but as Harry turned to leave, she added, whatever your reasons, Potter, remember that Hogwarts isn't Durmstrang. The game is played differently here. Harry paused, glancing back at her. I'm counting on it. The Halloween feast that evening was elaborate, though Harry noted the nervous energy permeating the Great Hall. Students from all three schools kept glancing at the goblet of fire, which had been moved to stand before Dumbledore's chair. Harry had submitted his name hours earlier, a simple slip of parchment with Harry Potter, Durmstrang Institute written in precise script. He'd felt the goblet's magic wash over him as it accepted his entry, probing his capabilities and intentions before the flames consumed the parchment. Now he sat at the Slytherin table again, maintaining polite conversation while remaining alert to the undercurrents around him. Conversations throughout the hall frequently turned to his unexpected presence, theories about his years at Durmstrang, and speculation about whether he might become champion. They can't decide whether to fear you or worship you, Daphne observed quietly from across the table. It's rather amusing. The pendulum between adoration and vilification swings quickly in Britain, Harry replied. I've studied your newspapers. Planning ahead for all contingencies. Always. As the feast concluded, Dumbledore rose to speak. The goblet is almost ready to make its decision, he announced. When the champions' names are called, I would ask them to come up to the top of the hall, walk along the staff table, and go through into the next chamber where they will receive their first instructions. With a dramatic gesture, Dumbledore extinguished most of the candles, leaving the goblet's blue-white flames as the primary illumination. The hall fell silent with anticipation. The flames suddenly turned red, sparks flying as a charred piece of parchment fluttered out. Dumbledore caught it. The champion for Beaux Batons, he read, is Fleur Delacour. Applause erupted as the silver-haired Partvila rose gracefully and proceeded to the indicated chamber. The goblet flared red again. The champion for Durmstrang, Dumbledore announced, is Harry Potter. A moment of stunned silence fell before scattered applause began, mixed with confused murmurs. Harry rose calmly, ignoring Karkaroff's triumphant expression and Krumm's momentary flash of disappointment quickly masked by respectful acknowledgement. As Harry walked toward the staff table, he noted the varied reactions, McGonagall's tight-lipped concern, Snape's calculating assessment, and most interestingly, the false Moody's brief expression of surprise quickly replaced by satisfaction. Curious, Harry thought. He expected a different outcome. Fleur Delacour waited in the chamber, standing near the fire. Her eyes widened slightly as Harry entered. "You?" she said with mild surprise. "But you are too young." "Apparently the goblet disagrees," Harry replied simply. They were joined moments later by Cedric Diggory, a handsome Hufflepuff announced as Hogwarts champion. The three sized each other up in silence until the door opened again, admitting a clearly agitated Dumbledore followed by Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, and several ministry officials. "Extraordinary!" Ludo Bagman exclaimed, seizing Harry's arm. "Absolutely extraordinary. Gentlemen, lady," he added, approaching the other champions, "may I introduce, incredible though it may seem, the fourth Triwizard champion?" Harry stiffened. "Fourth?" Before anyone could explain, the door burst open again, and a confused-looking Gryffindor fourth year was ushered in, Neville Longbottom, Harry recognized from his intelligence briefings. The boy looked terrified, his round face pale. "What is the meaning of this?" Fleur demanded. "I'd like to know that myself," Harry said coldly, freeing his arm from Bagman's grip and stepping back to assess the situation. Dumbledore turned to Longbottom. "Neville, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?" "No." Longbottom exclaimed, looking horrified. "I never went near it." "Did you ask an older student to put it in for you?" Dumbledore pressed, his voice remaining calm. "No, sir." Karkaroff stepped forward, fury evident in his features. "You cannot possibly allow this, Dumbledore. The rules state clearly, the rules state that those people whose names come out of the goblet of fire are bound to compete in the tournament," Barty Crouch interjected flatly. "Both Mr. Potter and Mr. Longbottom must compete. It is a binding magical contract." Harry's mind raced through implications, analyzing this unexpected development. The goblet was ancient magic, nearly impossible to confound. Someone with exceptional magical power and knowledge had manipulated it, and that someone wanted both him and Longbottom in the tournament. This was never about the competition, Harry realized. It's about forcing specific participants into a controlled scenario. The adults continued arguing around them. Madame Maxime accused Hogwarts of cheating by gaining 2 champions. Karkaroff threatened to lodge formal complaints. Through it all, Harry observed Moody's imposter, who watched the proceedings with barely concealed satisfaction. "Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said finally, turning to Harry, "given these unusual circumstances, would you prefer to withdraw? As you represent Durmstrang but are a British citizen, there may be flexibility." "No," Harry interrupted firmly. "I was chosen as Durmstrang's champion. I will compete." Karkaroff nodded sharply with approval. "As is proper. Potter has trained at Durmstrang for years. He represents our institution." "Very well," Dumbledore sighed. "Mr. Longbottom, I'm afraid you also must participate. The magical contract is binding." Longbottom looked as though he might faint. "But, I don't know how, I'm not ready." "The first task," Crouch continued mechanically, seemingly untroubled by the chaos, "will take place on November 24th. Champions are not permitted to ask for or accept help from their teachers. You will face the first challenge armed only with your wands. Due to the tournament's demanding nature, champions are exempt from end-of-year tests." As the officials continued explaining details, Harry moved subtly closer to Longbottom. "Relax," he murmured, his voice too low for others to hear. "Someone put your name in for a reason. They'll ensure you survive, at least until you've served their purpose. Longbottom stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. What? Who would? Why would anyone? That's what we both need to discover, Harry replied. Watch the defense professor. His eye sees everything, but he isn't who he appears to be. Before Longbottom could respond, Dumbledore dismissed the champions. As Harry turned to leave, he found himself face to face with the headmaster. Harry, Dumbledore said quietly, a moment, please. Harry nodded for Karkaroff to continue without him, then faced Dumbledore with neutral expression. Yes, headmaster. You have insight into what's happening here, Dumbledore stated rather than asked. Your warning to Mr. Longbottom suggests as much. Harry raised an eyebrow. You have exceptional hearing for a man your age. Among my lesser talents, Dumbledore acknowledged with the faintest smile. What do you suspect? I suspect, Harry replied carefully, that the tournament is a means to an end, not the objective itself. Someone powerful enough to confound the goblet wants both Longbottom and me in specific scenarios under controlled conditions. And why would they want that? Harry met the old wizard's gaze directly. Because the prophecy was ambiguous, wasn't it? The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. It could have meant either of us. Dumbledore's composure slipped momentarily, genuine surprise crossing his features. How did you? Durmstrang's libraries contain extensive prophetic records, Harry said. And Karkaroff was motivated to find information that might make me a more effective weapon. Is that how you see yourself? A weapon? It's how everyone else sees me, Harry replied without self-pity. I've simply chosen to be my own weapon rather than yours or Voldemort's. Dumbledore studied him with sad eyes. You could have contacted me, Harry. All these years, to what end? Harry interrupted, a rare flash of emotion breaking through. So you could return me to the Dursleys. Place me under different control. He shook his head. I made my choice when I was 8 years old, headmaster. I chose freedom. At what cost, I wonder? Dumbledore murmured. Harry's expression hardened. Less than the cost of remaining where you left me. He stepped back. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should rejoin my delegation. As Harry walked away, he felt Dumbledore's eyes on his back, weighing, calculating, perhaps even grieving for what might have been. It changed nothing. The pieces were in motion, the game board set. The Triwizard Tournament had begun, but Harry knew the real contest lay beneath its surface, a deadly chess match with players hidden in shadow, himself and Longbottom as pawns positioned for purposes yet unrevealed. Let them try, he thought as he stepped into the great hall, where whispers followed his every move. I've been preparing for this moment since the day Karkaroff found me. In the darkened hall, illuminated now by restored candlelight, Harry Potter moved with purposeful strides toward his future, a future he intended to claim on his own terms, regardless of prophecies or the plans of manipulative old men. Chapter 2, Blood and Stone. Morning light streamed through the enchanted ceiling of the great hall, painting the stone floor in warm golden hues that belied the November chill outside. Harry Potter sat at the Slytherin table, methodically consuming a breakfast far lighter than his British counterparts preferred. 6 years of Durmstrang's Spartan diet had trained his body to function optimally on minimal sustenance. The hall buzzed with whispers. 2 days had passed since the goblet's selection, and Harry's name hadn't left the student body's collective lips. Neither had Neville Longbottom's, though for entirely different reasons. Potter Stink's badges flashed throughout the hall, primarily among Hufflepuffs loyal to their champion, Cedric Diggory. Harry noted them with detached amusement. Psychological warfare was hardly novel to a Durmstrang student. They're saying you confounded the goblet, Daphne remarked, sliding onto the bench across from him. Unlike most Slytherins, she wore no badge. Rather impressive magic for a 4th year, apparently. Harry sipped his black coffee. And what do you think? I think someone entered Longbottom's name, not yours. She buttered toast with precise movements. Your selection as Durmstrang champion was legitimate. The real question is why someone wants Longbottom competing. Harry's estimation of her intelligence rose another notch. Perceptive. It's called paying attention. She nodded toward the Gryffindor table, where Longbottom sat alone, abandoned by his housemates. He's being ostracized. They believe he entered himself for glory. Curious how quickly loyalty fractures, Harry observed. Says the Durmstrang student to the Slytherin. Her lips curved slightly. We're hardly experts on blind loyalty. I prefer informed allegiance to blind loyalty. Is that what you gave Karkaroff? Informed allegiance? Harry studied her, recognizing the deliberate provocation. My relationship with Headmaster Karkaroff is mutually beneficial. Until it isn't, she finished for him. Before he could respond, a shadow fell across the table. Theodore Nott stood there, his narrow face contemplative rather than hostile. Potter, he said without preamble, a group of us study advanced magic after hours. We're curious about Durmstrang's approach to magical theory. Harry noted the careful wording, not asking about dark arts directly, but the implication clear. Are you now? We've hit limitations with standard Hogwarts curriculum, Nott continued. Particularly regarding intent-based casting and magical resonance. Daphne watched the exchange with veiled interest. Harry considered the request, seeing potential advantage in building a network within Hogwarts. Who comprises this group, he asked. Myself, Blaise Zabini, Daphne when she deigns to join us, and a few select others from different houses. Nott shifted slightly. We're discerning about membership. Harry nodded once. Tonight. 8 o'clock. Where? 7th floor corridor, across from the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, Daphne supplied. I'll escort you there. I look forward to it, Harry replied, his tone revealing nothing of his thoughts. As Nott departed, Harry returned to his breakfast, aware that Daphne was studying him with renewed interest. Testing the waters, Potter, she asked. Knowledge flows both ways, he replied simply. The morning owl post arrived, a flurry of wings and letters descending. A sleek eagle owl landed before Harry, extending a leg bearing the official Durmstrang seal. He untied the message, feeding the bird a strip of bacon before it departed. Bad news? Daphne inquired, noting his slight frown. Tournament business, he answered, tucking the message away. The wand weighing ceremony is scheduled for this afternoon. Ah yes, the ritual inspection of champions' wands. Will yours pass muster, I wonder? Harry's expression revealed nothing. Why wouldn't it? Rumor has it Durmstrang students carry specialized wands. Something about accommodating more intensive magic. Rumors, Harry said dismissively, though she wasn't entirely wrong. His primary wand had been modified by Durmstrang's wandcrafter to channel higher energy workings without destabilizing. His backup wands were even more specialized. Still, she pressed, Ollivander is conducting the ceremony. He'll know if modifications have been made. Ollivander made my wand, Harry replied. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. You still use your original wand? Surprise colored her voice. Harry allowed himself a small smile. I use the tools appropriate for each situation. Daphne's eyes widened fractionally in understanding. Multiple wands. That's highly regulated in Britain. Many things are highly regulated in Britain, he responded, rising from the table. It makes for a rather restrictive magical education. As Harry walked away, he felt dozens of eyes tracking his movement. The scrutiny had been constant since his arrival, but he'd grown accustomed to observation during his years at Durmstrang, where instructors monitored students for the slightest weakness or exceptional potential. The day passed in a blur of classes observed and mental notes taken. Though not officially participating in Hogwarts curriculum, Harry attended selected sessions to assess British magical education. The differences were stark and sometimes troubling. In charms, students executed spells by rote memorization, with minimal discussion of magical theory or energy manipulation. Transfiguration under McGonagall proved somewhat more rigorous, yet still lacked the fundamental understanding of matter-energy conversion that Durmstrang emphasized from a student's first year. Most concerning was defense against the dark arts, where the moody impostor taught with a fervor that bordered on obsession. The man's knowledge was extensive, that much was genuine, but his magical aura contained discordant notes that Harry's trained senses detected immediately. Whoever wore Moody's face carried the taint of dark rituals far more extreme than anything practiced at Durmstrang. By afternoon, Harry made his way to the small classroom where the wand-weighing ceremony would take place. He arrived deliberately early, finding only an elderly man with pale, moon-like eyes already present. "Ah, Mr. Potter," Ollivander said softly. "I wondered if I would see you again." "Mr. Ollivander," Harry acknowledged with a respectful nod. "You remember me." "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter." His silvery eyes seemed to look through Harry rather than at him. "Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. You have an excellent memory. And you have made some adjustments to my creation." There was no accusation in Ollivander's tone, merely observation. Harry didn't bother denying it. Necessary modifications for advanced work. Indeed. Ollivander extended a hand. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Harry withdrew his primary wand from his sleeve and presented it. Ollivander took it reverently, fingers tracing the intricate runes now etched into the wood near the handle, invisible to casual observation but clear to a wandmaker's trained eye. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Baltic amber resin infused into the core channel, expanded magical conduits, and is that dragon heartstring woven around the phoenix feather?" "A hybrid core increases stability for certain applications," Harry explained. "It also increases raw power at the expense of subtlety," Ollivander noted, giving the wand a gentle flick. A shower of gold and scarlet sparks erupted, brighter than normal. "Still compatible with your magic, though modified significantly." He handed the wand back with careful movements. "Durmstrang's wand crafters do interesting work, if somewhat aggressive in their approach. Different magical traditions have different priorities," Harry replied neutrally. Ollivander's gaze lingered on him. "The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. But the wizard shapes the wand through use. Yours has seen intense application." Before Harry could respond, the door opened as Rita Skeeter bustled in, her acid green quill floating beside her. Her predatory gaze fixed on Harry immediately. "Harry Potter," she exclaimed. "The boy who vanished, returned at last. The readers of the Daily Prophet are dying to know where you've been all these years." Harry's expression cooled. "I've been receiving an education, Miss Skeeter. At Durmstrang Institute, yes." She circled him like a shark scenting blood. "A school known for its unconventional curriculum. Tell me, Harry, why did you abandon Britain? Were you kidnapped? Seduced away by dark promises?" "Neither," Harry replied flatly. "I chose an education that would prepare me adequately." "For what, exactly?" Her quill scratched frantically. "For whatever comes," he said, meeting her gaze without blinking. The door opened again, admitting the other champions followed by Dumbledore, Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, and various tournament officials. Harry used the distraction to step away from Skeeter, positioning himself near Karkaroff. "Problems?" the Durmstrang headmaster murmured. "Nothing unexpected," Harry replied quietly. The ceremony proceeded with formal introductions and explanations. When time came for wand examination, Ollivander worked methodically. "Fleur's rosewood wand with Vela hair core, from your grandmother, I presume. Cedric's ash and unicorn hair, polished regularly, I see, and finally Neville's cherry and unicorn hair, a loyal wand, if somewhat temperamental." When Harry presented his wand again, Karkaroff stepped forward. "As Mr. Potter's wand has been modified according to Durmstrang traditions, I request that any comments be limited to functionality rather than specific alterations." Our wand-craft methods are proprietary. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. That seems reasonable, provided the wand meets tournament requirements for safety. Ollivander examined the wand again publicly, saying only, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. In good working order despite customizations. It should serve Mr. Potter well in the tournament. After the ceremony concluded, Skeeter attempted to corral the champions for photographs and interviews. Harry positioned himself strategically, ensuring he was never alone with the reporter. When she finally trapped him near a window, he was prepared. "Harry, darling," she purred, "surely the readers deserve to know what dark secrets you've been learning in those northern mountains." "I wasn't aware the Daily Prophet specialized in educational curricula," Harry replied coolly. "But if you're genuinely interested in comparative magical education, I can put you in touch with scholars who've published extensively on the subject." Her quill hovered eagerly. "But what about you personally?" "The traumatized orphan, spirited away to a school known for dark arts, Ms. Skeeter," Harry interrupted, his voice dropping to a register that made her step back instinctively. "I notice your quill has been embellishing rather dramatically." Enchanted quick-quotes quills with accuracy-altering charms fall under restricted magical devices according to the 1982 Journalism Ethics Act. The quill faltered mid-air. "The Department of Magical Law Enforcement takes such violations quite seriously," he continued conversationally. "Especially when targeting an international diplomatic guest, which I am as Durmstrang's champion." Color drained from her face. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you on British law," he corrected with a thin smile. "Isn't that ironic? The foreign student reminding a British reporter about her own country's regulations." Skeeter retreated, her predatory confidence shaken. Harry watched her go, aware of Dumbledore observing the exchange from across the room, his expression thoughtful. "Focus on your intent," Harry instructed, pacing before the small group assembled in the room of requirement. "Magic responds to will channeled through clarity of purpose." 8 students watched him with varying degrees of skepticism and fascination. Beyond Theodore Nott and Blaise Zabini, Daphne had recruited her sister Astoria, a sharp-minded Ravenclaw named Anthony Goldstein, a quiet Hufflepuff called Susan Bones, and surprisingly, Hermione Granger from Gryffindor. Most unexpected was the presence of Luna Lovegood, whose dreamy exterior concealed a startlingly intuitive grasp of magical theory. "Hogwarts teaches you to focus on precise wand movements and correct pronunciation," Harry continued. "Durmstrang begins with the fundamental nature of magic itself, as an extension of will and intent. But the wand movements and incantations are necessary," Hermione objected. "They direct the magical flow and, their training wheels," Harry interrupted. "Useful for beginners, but ultimately limiting." To demonstrate, he drew his wand and pointed at a feather resting on a table. Without speaking or moving his wand in the prescribed levitation charm pattern, the feather rose smoothly into the air, rotated in complex patterns, then gently descended. "I just performed what you call, Wingardium Leviosa," he explained, "but I didn't use the incantation or wand movement. I simply directed my magic with clear intent, lift, move, lower." "That's silent casting," Hermione pointed out. "Advanced, but not unheard of." "Silent casting still uses the incantation mentally," Harry corrected. "This is different. Watch again." This time, he closed his eyes and extended his hand without his wand. The feather rose once more, hovering steadily. "Wandless too?" Blaise whispered, impressed. "The wand is a focus tool, not the source of magic," Harry explained, opening his eyes. "Your magical core is the source. Everything else, wands, incantations, movements, exists to help you direct that power efficiently." "Durmstrang teaches wandless magic to everyone?" Susan asked, eyes wide. "We begin training magical awareness from day one," Harry confirmed. "Understanding your magical core, sensing how your intent shapes your power. Only after that foundation is established do we move to wand work." "That's completely opposite to Hogwarts' approach," Anthony noted. We start with structured spellcasting and only the most advanced students ever attempt wandless magic. Different philosophical approaches, Harry agreed. Hogwarts builds external structure first. Durmstrang builds internal awareness first. For the next hour, Harry guided them through basic magical sensing exercises. By session's end, Hermione had managed to levitate her feather with significantly reduced wand movement, while Luna had done so with a dreamy smile and seemingly minimal effort. "You have potential," Harry told them as they prepared to leave. "But understand, this isn't about learning dark magic as Britain defines it. It's about understanding magic's true nature beyond arbitrary classifications." "Is that why you're teaching us?" Daphne asked, lingering behind as others departed. "To spread Durmstrang's philosophy?" Harry considered her question. "Partly. Knowledge should flow freely. But there are practical benefits to having allies who understand different magical approaches." "Allies for what, Potter?" Her blue eyes studied him intently. "For whatever comes," he replied, echoing his earlier words to Skeeter. She stepped closer, lowering her voice though they were alone. "You believe he's coming back?" "The Dark Lord." It wasn't a question. Harry didn't treat it as one. "Voldemort never truly died," he said simply. "And when he returns, Britain's restricted magical education will leave its practitioners woefully unprepared. Including me?" There was no fear in her question, only pragmatic assessment. "Unless you expand your understanding." Harry met her gaze directly. "Durmstrang taught me that survival doesn't distinguish between light and dark magic, only between effective and ineffective. That's a dangerous perspective in Britain. Truth often is." He gestured around the room of requirement. "Why did you bring Hermione Granger?" "She seems the least likely to embrace alternative magical theory." "Because she's brilliant," Daphne answered without hesitation. "Closed-minded about rules, yes, but her magical potential is extraordinary. And she's connected to Longbottom, they study together sometimes." "You think Longbottom is important?" "I think anyone targeted by the same plot as Harry Potter is worth watching." She tilted her head. "You've been observing him too?" Harry nodded, impressed again by her perception. "His selection wasn't random. Someone powerful wants both of us in this tournament, and I intend to discover why." "The false Moody," Daphne guessed. Harry raised an eyebrow. "You noticed?" "Not immediately. But his magical aura shifts sometimes, flickers, like a bad disillusionment charm." She shrugged at his surprised expression. "My family has always been sensitive to magical disguises. It's why we remained neutral during the war, we could tell when people were acting under compulsion." "Useful talent," Harry remarked, filing away this information. "What else have you noticed about him?" "He drinks constantly from his flask, even when he thinks no one is watching. He's particularly interested in Longbottom, giving him books about magical plants. And he watches you when you're not looking, not with suspicion, but with calculation. He's planning something involving both of us," Harry concluded. "The question is, what? And who is he really?" Daphne added. "Under the disguise?" Harry began extinguishing the practice candles with casual flicks of his fingers. "That's what I intend to find out." The first task approached with increasing speed. Whispers circulated through the student body, dragons, the champions would face dragons. Harry had known this for days, having detected the magical signatures of the massive creatures upon their arrival on the grounds. 3 days before the task, Harry sat by the Black Lake at dawn, cross-legged on a flat stone, preparing his body and magic through Durmstrang's meditation rituals. His eyes closed, breath regulated, he extended his magical senses outward in expanding rings, cataloging every entity within range. The giant squid's massive presence pulsed beneath the water's surface. Merpeople clustered near their underwater village. Various magical creatures rustled through the forbidden forest. And approaching from behind him, "You're up early, Mr. Potter." Harry didn't open his eyes. As are you, Professor Snape. The potions master circled to face him, black robes billowing slightly in the morning breeze. Practicing dark rituals by the lake. How conspicuous. Basic centering meditation, Harry corrected, opening his eyes to study the man who had known his mother. Nothing dark about it, unless Britain now classifies self-awareness as forbidden. Snape's expression remained impassive, but Harry sensed the man's magical aura probing his own, subtle, expert, but detectable to someone trained as Harry had been. Your notoriety precedes you, Snape said finally. The boy who lived, transformed into Durmstrang's dark prodigy. Rather theatrical. I don't cultivate notoriety, Professor. Others do that for me. Indeed. Snape's dark eyes revealed nothing. Your father would have reveled in such attention. Harry absorbed the deliberate provocation without reaction. So I've been told. Fortunately, I am not defined solely by either of my parents. No. Snape's lip curled slightly. Yet you return to Britain trailing whispers of dark arts and power. The prodigal son, demonstrating how far he surpassed his humble origins. Is there a question in there, Professor? A curiosity, Snape amended. Karkaroff has shaped you into something specific. I wonder if you understand the role you're being groomed to play. Harry rose fluidly to his feet. Better his purpose than Dumbledore's. At least Karkaroff is transparent in his ambitions. Is he? Snape's voice dropped lower. His arm bears the same mark as mine, Mr. Potter. When it burns again, and it will, where do you think his true loyalties will lie? The statement confirmed Harry's suspicions about both men. With self-preservation, obviously. As will yours, I expect. Something like surprise flashed in Snape's eyes before his mask returned. You are not what Dumbledore expected to find when you returned. Good, Harry said simply. Expectations are limitations. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a task to prepare for. As he walked past Snape toward the castle, the professor's voice followed him. Dragons respond to particular magical frequencies, Potter. Their scales resonate differently than mammalian hide. Harry paused, glancing back. Is that advice, Professor? Merely an observation from one who appreciates precise magical theory. Snape's face remained unreadable. Do with it what you will. Harry nodded once in acknowledgement before continuing his journey. The interaction had confirmed several of his assessments, Snape's conflicted loyalties, his complex relationship with Harry's parents, and most importantly, his sophisticated understanding of magic beyond Hogwarts' standard curriculum. Another potential piece on the chessboard, though whose side he truly served remained unclear. The day of the first task dawned clear and cold. Harry followed a precise routine he'd established years ago before combat examinations at Durmstrang. Sunrise meditation. Cold immersion in the lake. A light meal of specific proteins and slow-burning carbohydrates. And finally, ritual preparation. In the privacy of a warded section of the Durmstrang ship, Harry stripped to the waist and began applying protective runes to his skin using a mixture of potions ingredients and his own blood, a practice that would horrify British wizards but was standard procedure for Durmstrang students facing magical creatures. The runes formed intricate patterns across his chest, back, and arms, enhancing reflexes, reinforcing magical shields, and most importantly, creating resonance patterns specifically calibrated to dragon magic based on Snape's subtle hint. As he worked, Crumb entered, nodding with approval at the preparations. The blood runes of Kashii, he observed. Good choice for dragons. Modified for the specific species, Harry confirmed, carefully inscribing the final symbols around his wrists. Hungarian horntail, according to my intelligence. Crumb frowned. The most dangerous breed. Karkaroff will be displeased if his champion is injured. Karkaroff will be displeased if his champion shows weakness, Harry corrected with a wry smile. Better injured than defeated. True, Crumb acknowledged. Your approach? Direct combat or evasion? Neither, Harry replied, pulling on a specially prepared shirt that would conceal the runes while not interfering with their function. Dragons are too powerful for direct confrontation and too sensorially acute for simple evasion. I'll use resonance disruption. Ambitious, Crumb noted. But effective if executed properly. Harry finished dressing in his modified Durmstrang uniform, ensuring his 3 wands were secured in their respective holsters. Have they announced the order of champions? You draw last, Crumb informed him. After Delacour, Diggory, and Longbottom. Harry nodded, unsurprised. Drawing the horntail and performing last would maximize dramatic tension, exactly what someone orchestrating a spectacle would arrange. Time to go, he said, completing his preparations. Wish me luck. You don't need luck, Crumb replied with gruff approval. You need perfect execution. Harry smiled. Durmstrang to the core, Victor. The champion's tent buzzed with nervous energy when Harry arrived. Cedric paced restlessly while Fleur maintained composed dignity despite her pallor. Neville Longbottom looked positively ill, clutching his wand so tightly his knuckles had whitened. Ludo Bagman bounced between them with inappropriate cheerfulness, explaining the task: retrieve a golden egg from a nesting dragon mother. When Harry entered, Bagman's eyes lit up with particular excitement. Ah, our final champion. Harry, boy, just in time. Harry nodded politely, positioning himself with clear sightlines to both exits. He noted the small purple silk bag in Bagman's hand, already guessing its purpose. Now then, Bagman continued, each of you will select a model from this bag representing the dragon you'll face. Ladies first. Fleur reached in with trembling fingers, withdrawing a miniature Welsh green with the number 2 around its neck. Cedric went next, selecting a Swedish short snout bearing the number 1. Longbottom reluctantly drew a Chinese fireball marked with a 3. When Harry reached into the bag, only one model remained, the Hungarian horntail with a 4th tag, exactly as he'd anticipated. The tiny dragon snapped at his fingers with surprising ferocity. Well, there we have it. Bagman declared. Mr. Diggory, at the whistle, you'll. A commotion outside interrupted him as the tent flap was thrust aside. Minister Fudge entered, flanked by Dolores Umbridge and 2 stern-faced wizards Harry recognized as Aurors. Mr. Potter, Fudge announced with forced authority, a matter of security has arisen regarding your participation. Harry straightened, immediately alert. What matter, Minister? We've received intelligence, Umbridge simpered, that you intend to employ restricted magical practices during today's task. What intelligence? Harry asked coldly. One of the Aurors stepped forward. A concerned party reported observing you performing blood rituals this morning aboard the Durmstrang ship. Interesting, Harry thought. Someone got through Durmstrang's security wards. The list of wizards capable of that feat was exceedingly short. What I did was standard Durmstrang preparation for facing magical creatures, Harry replied evenly. Nothing in the tournament rules prohibits such practices. Blood magic is classified as dark arts under British law, Umbridge countered with a wide, unpleasant smile. Section 13 of the Dark Arts Prevention Act specifically, is superseded by international magical cooperation treaties, interrupted a crisp female voice. Natalia Petrova, Durmstrang's legal attaché, entered the tent with Karkaroff close behind. Specifically, the Triwizard Tournament Charter, Section 8, Paragraph 7, champions shall be permitted to employ magical techniques consistent with their school's approved educational practices. Karkaroff's eyes glittered dangerously. Blood enhancement runes are standard curriculum for 6th-year Durmstrang students, as the British Ministry well knows. Are you attempting to sabotage my champion minutes before competition? Fudge backpedaled immediately. Not at all, Igor. Simply a procedural check. The ministry must ensure all competitors follow appropriate. Minister, Harry interrupted, his voice deadly quiet, I understand British Magical Society fears what it doesn't comprehend. However, attempting to force me to compete without my school's standard protective measures would constitute deliberate endangerment. The implication hung in the air, an international incident waiting to happen. Perhaps, Petrova suggested with poisonous sweetness, a compromise. Mr. Potter can submit to magical scanning after the task to verify no prohibited magic was used on others. Self-protective measures remain his right as Durmstrang's champion. Fudge glanced at the growing crowd outside the tent, clearly calculating political damage. That seems reasonable. Cornelius. Umbridge protested. The task begins in 5 minutes, Fudge overruled her. We will review the situation afterward. He nodded stiffly to Harry before departing, Umbridge shooting venomous glances over her shoulder. When they'd gone, Bagman cleared his throat. Well. Exciting start already. Now then, champions, the whistle blew, signaling Cedric's turn. As the Hufflepuff departed looking slightly green, Harry exchanged a significant look with Karkaroff, who nodded once before leaving. The message was clear, make a statement. One by one, the champions faced their dragons. Through the tent walls, Harry heard crowd reactions, gasps, cheers, occasional screams. Bagman's amplified commentary provided partial details of each performance, Cedric using transfiguration to distract his dragon. Fleur employing some form of enchantment that partially succeeded. Longbottom, surprisingly, utilizing specialized herbology knowledge, something involving rare plants that disoriented the fireball long enough for him to snatch his egg. Finally, the whistle sounded for Harry. He stepped from the tent into the arena, immediately assessing the terrain, rocky, uneven, with limited cover and one dominant boulder formation where the horntail crouched over her clutch of eggs, the golden prize visible among them. The crowd fell oddly silent as Harry emerged, many students training omnioculars on him, likely looking for evidence of the rumored dark rituals. The dragon observed him with ancient, malevolent eyes, smoke curling from her nostrils. Harry didn't immediately draw his wand. Instead, he stood perfectly still, extending his magical senses toward the dragon, feeling the distinctive resonance pattern of her innate magic, wild, primal power shaped by millennia of evolution. The horntail's tail lashed impatiently, steel spikes catching sunlight. She hissed, the sound like steam escaping a pressure valve. From the stands, Harry heard confused murmurs. Why wasn't he moving? What was he doing just standing there? Then, in one fluid motion, Harry drew his primary wand and planted his feet in a dueling stance unfamiliar to most British wizards, offensive rather than defensive positioning. Draco resonant I am Percipio, he intoned, the spell sending invisible tendrils of magic toward the horntail, mapping her magical frequency in greater detail. The dragon sensed the probe, rearing back with a thunderous roar that shook the stadium. She inhaled deeply, chest expanding as she prepared to unleash her flame. Harry didn't retreat. Instead, he traced a complex pattern with his wand, the runes on his body beginning to glow faintly beneath his clothing. Resonant I am disruptum, he called, his voice carrying unusual harmonics. The spell struck not the dragon herself but the air surrounding her, creating a rippling distortion visible as heat waves. The horntail released her flame, but the fire dispersed in mid-air, scattering into harmless sparks as it encountered Harry's resonance disruption field. Confusion flickered in the dragon's ancient eyes. She tried again with the same result, her flame dissipating before reaching its target. Extraordinary! Bagman shouted. Potter has somehow neutralized the horntail's flame. I've never seen anything like it. The crowd erupted in amazed chatter. At the judges' table, Dumbledore leaned forward with intense interest, while Karkaroff looked smugly vindicated. But Harry knew the resonance disruption was temporary, it affected the magical properties of dragonfire but did nothing against physical attacks. As if realizing this, the horntail abandoned her flame and lunged forward, jaws snapping. Harry moved with practiced precision, his blood rune-enhanced reflexes allowing him to roll beneath the strike and come up behind a boulder. The dragon's tail smashed against his cover, fragmenting the stone. Time for Phase 2. Harry drew his second wand with his left hand, a configuration that drew gasps from the crowd. Dual-wielding wands was rarely seen in Britain, though standard combat training at Durmstrang. With his right wand, he maintained the resonance disruption field. With his left, he began a different incantation, voice rising and falling in rhythmic cadence. Saxum vitae, saxum animatum, surgite eti prodigite. The broken boulder fragments trembled, then rose into the air, reshaping into roughly humanoid stone constructs, a variation on the animation charm that briefly imbued the stone with simplified consciousness. 5 stone guardians, each the size of a man, moved to surround the dragon. The horntail roared in confusion, uncertain which threat to address first. She swiped at one stone guardian, shattering it, but the others pressed forward, distracting her from Harry's advance. Harry moved with calculated steps, maintaining both spells while advancing toward the nest. The dragon's attention divided between the stone constructs and the disruption field affecting her flame, creating the opening he needed. But the horntail was no ordinary predator. Abandoning the stone guardians, she whipped her massive tail in a sweeping arc, directly at Harry's position. He had milliseconds to react. Dropping the resonance field, Harry channeled power through both wands into a shield unlike any taught at Hogwarts, not the standard translucent barrier, but a blackish-purple hexagonal lattice that materialized with a sound like cracking glass. Protego obsidian. The tail struck with devastating force. Harry's shield held, but the impact sent him flying backward, tumbling across the rocky ground. He maintained his grip on both wands, a testament to Durmstrang's combat training, and rose immediately to one knee. The crowd gasped as the dragon charged, her attention now fully on Harry. With no time to re-establish complex spells, he shifted to direct combat. Harry's wands moved in perfect synchronization, his voice clear despite the pressure, Fulmen Katina. Lightning erupted from his right wand, not striking the dragon directly but forming a crackling chain that encircled her legs, temporarily binding her movement. Caligantia Maxima. From his left wand came billowing black smoke that obscured the arena, hiding him from the dragon's sight while he retained perfect awareness through the blood runes enhancing his senses. Using the distraction, Harry sprinted toward the nest, his footsteps supernaturally silent. The dragon thrashed against the lightning bonds, breaking free just as Harry reached the eggs. She sensed him somehow, despite the smoke, and lunged blindly. Harry grabbed the golden egg and dove sideways as massive jaws snapped shut inches from where he'd stood. Rolling to his feet at the arena's edge, Harry banished the smoke with a sweep of his wand, revealing the dragon still guarding her real eggs but him safely beyond her reach, golden prize clutched against his chest. The stadium erupted. Students stood on their seats, shouting and cheering despite house rivalries or personal opinions about Harry. They had witnessed magic beyond their textbooks, fluid, adaptive, and overwhelmingly effective. Incredible! Bagman bellowed. Potter secures his egg using some of the most extraordinary magic I've ever witnessed. Dual wanding, stone animation, and what appeared to be modified elemental conjuration. Absolutely spectacular. Harry caught his breath, the blood runes on his skin still glowing faintly beneath his now torn uniform. He looked to the judges' stand, noting the varied reactions. Madame Maxime looked reluctantly impressed. Dumbledore studied Harry with calculating intensity. Karkaroff couldn't have appeared more pleased if he'd performed the magic himself. Bagman was practically bouncing with excitement. Only Crouch maintained rigid neutrality. As dragon handlers rushed forward to subdue the horntail, Harry spotted Umbridge conferring urgently with several ministry officials, gesturing in his direction with undisguised hostility. Let them come, he thought, tucking away his second wand but keeping his primary at ready. The demonstration had served its purpose, establishing the gulf between Durmstrang's practical combat magic and Hogwarts' theoretical approach. Harry returned to the champion's tent for medical evaluation, though his protective runes had prevented serious injury. Madame Pomfrey clucked disapprovingly at his unorthodox magical protection but couldn't argue with its effectiveness. That was bloody brilliant, came a voice from the adjacent bed. Neville Longbottom stared at Harry with undisguised awe, his own minor burns already treated. Your performance was impressive as well, Harry replied, genuinely surprised by Longbottom's competence. Devils snare seedlings to entangle the dragon's legs while using venomous tentacula extract as olfactory distraction. Creative application of herbology. Neville blushed. Professor Moody suggested I focus on my strengths. Said I shouldn't try to be a duelist when I'm rubbish at it. Harry filed away this confirmation of the false Moody's interest in Longbottom. Good advice, actually. Effective strategy leverages natural talents rather than mimicking others. But what you did? Neville shook his head in wonder. Multiple wands, wandless magic, those glowing symbols under your shirt, is that what Durmstrang teaches? Some of it, Harry replied carefully. Different approaches to magical theory produce different capabilities. Before Neville could respond, Hermione Granger burst into the tent, rushing to Neville's side. You were brilliant. I've never seen anyone use herbology that way in a combat situation. She noticed Harry and hesitated, clearly conflicted between her academic curiosity about his magic and her Gryffindor instinct to distrust anything Slytherin adjacent. Potter, she acknowledged stiffly. Your magic was unorthodox. Thank you, Granger, he replied with mild amusement. Yours would be too, if you weren't constrained by Britain's restrictive magical education. Her eyes narrowed. Some magical restrictions exist for good reasons. Like preventing teenagers from facing dragons effectively. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly torn between defending Hogwarts and acknowledging the evidence of her own eyes. Before she could formulate a response, Karkaroff swept into the tent, triumph written across his features. Potter. Perfect execution. The judges have awarded your scores. His smile broadened. You are in first place with 47 points. 10 from myself, naturally. 9 from Dumbledore and Maxime, they could hardly score lower given the technical brilliance. Even that ministry bureaucrat Crouch gave you 8. Only Bagman gave you perfect marks. Neville and Hermione exchanged glances. I got 38, Neville volunteered after a moment. Cedric has 40, and Fleur 36. Harry nodded, processing this information. First place painted a larger target on his back, but the demonstration of his capabilities had been necessary to establish his position. There is one complication, Karkaroff added, his expression souring. The British Ministry representatives are raising formal concerns about your use of prohibited magic. Particularly the blood runes and dual wanding. Neither violates tournament rules, Harry noted. Of course not, Karkaroff agreed. But they're demanding an investigation into whether such magic constitutes an unfair advantage, due to being classified as restricted arts in Britain. Hermione looked troubled. Blood magic is heavily regulated because it can be used to control others or create binding contracts without consent. I used my own blood, on my own body, for purely defensive purposes, Harry pointed out. The distinction matters, or should, in any rational magical legal system. Since when has the ministry been rational? Karkaroff snorted. Petrova is handling it. In the meantime, you should prepare for the public reaction. Your performance has rather complicated perceptions. After Karkaroff departed, Harry gathered his belongings, aware of Neville and Hermione watching him with conflicted expressions. You're not what I expected, Neville said finally. Harry raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone darker, Neville admitted. The way they talk about Durmstrang, I thought you'd be cursing everything in sight. Dark doesn't mean evil, Harry replied. Just as light doesn't guarantee good. Magic is intent manifest through power, nothing more, nothing less. That philosophy is dangerous, Hermione said quietly. No, Harry corrected. It's honest. And honesty is only dangerous to those who prefer comforting lies. He nodded to them both. Congratulations on your performance, Longbottom. Perhaps we can compare notes sometime. As Harry departed the tent, he found Daphne waiting outside, arms crossed against the November chill. "Quite the exhibition," she remarked, falling into step beside him. "Did you expect anything less?" "I expected competence. You demonstrated mastery." Her eyes held newfound respect. "The ministry officials looked ready to arrest you on the spot." "They can try," Harry replied with a confidence that wasn't bravado. "Half the school is terrified of you now," she continued. "The other half wants to learn everything you know." "And which half are you in, Greengrass?" Her smile was enigmatic. "I prefer to maintain my neutrality while gathering information." Harry laughed softly. "Very Slytherin." "Speaking of which," she said, her tone shifting to something more serious, "Malfoy was watching your performance with particular interest. He's already sent an owl, presumably to his father." "Expected," Harry acknowledged. "The Death Eater families will be assessing whether I'm a threat or potential ally." "And which are you?" she asked. Harry stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "I'm neither. I have my own agenda that doesn't align with Voldemort or his sycophants." To her credit, Daphne didn't flinch at the name. "Then our study group just became more important, didn't it? You're building a third faction." Her perception was remarkable. Harry studied her with new appreciation. "Perhaps. Though, faction implies political ambition. My goals are more practical. Survival," she deduced. "You're preparing for war." "War is coming," Harry confirmed quietly. "Whether Britain acknowledges it or not. The question is who will be prepared when it arrives." In the days following the first task, Harry's position at Hogwarts shifted dramatically. Students who had previously watched him with suspicion now observed with fascinated respect, from a safe distance. His study group doubled in size, though Harry carefully vetted each potential member. Most professors maintained professional neutrality, though their lessons now often included pointed references to the proper application of magic whenever Harry attended. McGonagall in particular seemed determined to emphasize ethical considerations in Transfiguration after witnessing his animated stone guardians. The imposter Moody, interestingly, had become more direct in his approach, inviting Harry to his office to discuss advanced defense techniques. Harry politely declined, preferring to observe the man from afar while investigating his true identity. One evening in mid-December, Harry and Daphne sat in a secluded corner of the library, surrounded by ancient tomes on magical disguises. Their research into the false Moody had yielded several possibilities, none definitive. "Polyjuice potion is most likely," Daphne whispered, indicating a passage. "The consistent drinking from his flask, the occasional flickering in his magical signature, all consistent with polyjuice." "Agreed," Harry replied, "but that only tells us the method, not the identity." He closed a heavy book on long-term transfiguration effects. "We need to narrow the field of suspects. Someone with access to the real Moody," Daphne reasoned. "Someone with sufficient dark arts knowledge to maintain the deception under Dumbledore's nose. Someone connected to both you and Longbottom." Harry nodded, impressed again by her analytical mind. Over the past weeks, they had developed an effective partnership that extended beyond research. Daphne's political acumen complemented his magical knowledge, while her connections among pure-blood families provided intelligence Harry couldn't access directly. Their relationship had evolved into something Harry hadn't anticipated, genuine respect that bordered on friendship, perhaps more. She challenged his assumptions without fear, questioned his methods without judgment, and most surprisingly, seemed to see past the layers of identity he presented to others. "What about Barty Crouch Jr.? Daphne suggested suddenly. "He was a Death Eater, reportedly died in Azkaban, but his body was released to his father, the same Crouch who's judging the tournament." Harry considered this possible. Crouch Sr. has been acting strangely throughout the tournament. Distracted, mechanically following procedures. Exactly like someone under the Imperius curse, Daphne finished. Before they could pursue this theory further, Victor Krum appeared between the bookshelves. "Harry," he said in low, urgent Bulgarian, "Karkaroff requires your presence. Ministry officials have arrived with formal citations." Harry stood immediately. "What citations?" "Educational decree violations," Victor replied grimly. "They are attempting to classify your study group as unauthorized instruction in restricted arts." Harry exchanged a significant look with Daphne. "Who filed the complaint?" "Umbridge," Victor spat the name. "The Toad Woman." "Political," Daphne assessed immediately. "They couldn't challenge your tournament performance directly without violating international agreements, so they're targeting your extracurricular activities instead." "Where?" Harry asked Victor. "Great Hall. They brought Aurors." Harry's expression hardened. "Then we shouldn't keep them waiting." When they arrived, the Great Hall had been partially cleared, with 4 Aurors positioned at strategic points. Umbridge stood smugly beside Minister Fudge, while Dumbledore maintained a carefully neutral expression from the head table. Karkaroff and Petrova faced the ministry contingent with barely concealed hostility. Students pressed against the doors and windows, straining to observe the confrontation. Harry noted his study group members among them, looking concerned. "Ah, Mr. Potter," Umbridge simpered as Harry entered. "How good of you to join us." "Madam Undersecretary," Harry acknowledged with perfect politeness. "Minister. I understand there's some concern about educational practices." Fudge puffed up importantly. "Mr. Potter, we have received information that you have been conducting unauthorized classes teaching restricted magical practices to Hogwarts students." "I've been facilitating a study group," Harry corrected. "Sharing comparative magical theory and supervised practice of standard spells using different methodologies. According to our intelligence," Umbridge continued, "you have been teaching wandless magic, dual wanding techniques, and discussing theoretical applications of blood magic, all restricted subjects under Educational Decree No. 27. Which does not apply to visiting students from foreign institutions," Petrova interjected. "Mr. Potter's educational activities fall under Durmstrang's jurisdiction as established in our prior agreement." "His activities, yes," Umbridge conceded with a wide, unpleasant smile. "But not his corruption of British students. Educational Decree 27 clearly states that no student shall receive instruction in restricted magical arts from unauthorized personnel." "I've taught no restricted arts," Harry stated firmly. "Only alternative approaches to standard magic that any Hogwarts student could legally learn." "Alternative approaches derived from dark arts traditions," Umbridge countered. "Derived from comprehensive magical theory," Harry corrected, maintaining his composure. "Nothing taught violated British law." "Perhaps," Dumbledore finally spoke, "we should hear from the students themselves." He gestured toward the doors where Harry's study group members waited. "Ms. Granger, would you share what you've learned in Mr. Potter's sessions?" Hermione stepped forward nervously. "We've been studying magical theory, sir. Understanding how intent affects spell potency, how to sense magical cores, and how different visualization techniques can improve standard spellcasting." "And has Mr. Potter taught you any specific spells classified as dark arts?" "No, sir," she replied firmly. "He's been very clear about focusing on principles rather than specific restricted spells." Umbridge's smile faltered slightly. "The Ministry remains concerned about foreign magical influences corrupting our educational standards." "A fascinating concern," Harry remarked, "considering Hogwarts invited foreign schools to participate in this tournament specifically to promote international magical cooperation." Several students snickered. Fudge's complexion reddened. "Nevertheless," Umbridge pressed, "we must insist that all extracurricular instruction cease immediately, pending Ministry review." "On what grounds?" Petrova demanded. "You've presented no evidence of wrongdoing." "Preventative measures," Umbridge replied with false sweetness. "Until we can verify the content of these sessions." Harry considered his options. Direct confrontation would escalate the situation unnecessarily. A strategic retreat might prove more beneficial. I understand your concerns, he said finally. While I maintain that nothing improper has occurred, I respect Hogwarts' sovereignty over its educational environment. Our study group will suspend formal meetings until this matter is resolved. Karkaroff looked ready to object, but Harry caught his eye with a subtle warning. This wasn't surrender, merely repositioning. A wise decision, Mr. Potter, Fudge declared, clearly relieved to avoid further confrontation. The Ministry appreciates your cooperation. As the officials departed, Harry's study group gathered around him in the emptying hall. What now? Blaise asked. We just give up. Of course not, Harry replied quietly. We adapt. The room of requirement remains our sanctuary, but we'll need to be more discreet about attendance patterns. They're watching you specifically, Daphne observed. If you're not directly teaching. Harry nodded, understanding her implication. The group continues under rotating leadership. You've all learned enough to begin teaching each other while I provide individual guidance. Decentralize, Theodore not murmured appreciatively. Very Slytherin. Very practical, Harry corrected. Knowledge cannot be contained by governmental decree, it simply finds new channels. As the group dispersed, Dumbledore approached Harry, his expression contemplative. Impressive handling of that situation, Mr. Potter. You diffused tension while conceding nothing of substance. Political necessity, Harry replied neutrally. Indeed. Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled, though his gaze remained sharp. I find myself increasingly curious about your education at Durmstrang. It seems to have prepared you for more than magical combat. A comprehensive education addresses all forms of conflict, magical, political, and philosophical. Philosophy, Dumbledore mused. A fascinating subject. I wonder, what philosophical framework guides your approach to magic? Surely not the same utilitarian view that Gellert Grindelwald once espoused at that institution. The subtle probe was expertly delivered, associating Harry's education with a dark wizard while couching it as intellectual curiosity. My philosophy is pragmatic, headmaster, Harry replied carefully. I believe magic itself has no moral quality, only the intent and actions of the wielder. I believe artificial restrictions based on fear rather than understanding create dangerous ignorance. And I believe that true security comes from knowledge, not prohibition. Bold perspectives for one so young, Dumbledore observed. Age is irrelevant to truth, Harry countered. Either my philosophy is sound, or it isn't. And if that philosophy leads others toward dangerous paths, then the flaw lies in their intent, not in the knowledge itself. Harry met the headmaster's gaze steadily. You cannot protect people by keeping them ignorant, only by teaching them wisdom alongside power. Something like sadness crossed Dumbledore's features. A sentiment I once shared, to my great regret. Before Harry could respond, McGonagall approached with purposeful stride. Albus, the Great Hall must be prepared for the announcement. Ah, yes. Dumbledore's demeanor shifted to genial headmaster once more. The Yule Ball, Mr. Potter. A Triwizard Tournament tradition. As a champion, you will be expected to open the dancing with a partner of your choice. Harry nodded, filing away this information while still processing their interrupted philosophical debate. I understand. As Harry departed, he reflected on the rapidly evolving political landscape. The Ministry's intervention confirmed his suspicions. His presence at Hogwarts threatened established power structures, not through direct confrontation but by offering alternatives to their monopoly on magical knowledge. Exactly as he had intended. Snow fell in thick flakes beyond the windows of the potions classroom where Harry worked alone, carefully measuring ingredients for the complex solution required to test his theory about Moody's imposter. The late December evening had cleared most students from the dungeons as they prepared for the approaching Yule Ball. Snape had granted Harry access to the laboratory with only a raised eyebrow and cryptic comment about educational diplomacy, another data point suggesting the potions master's complicated allegiances. The solution needed precise timing. Harry added powdered bicorn horn, stirring exactly 7 times counterclockwise before introducing 3 drops of salamander blood. The potion hissed softly, shifting from muddy brown to clear blue. Essence of revelation, came Daphne's voice from the doorway. Designed to neutralize concealment potions upon contact. Advanced work. Harry didn't look up as he continued stirring. Your knowledge of restricted potions is impressive for a Hogwarts student. My family's library is comprehensive. She entered, closing the door behind her. You believe Moody is using polyjuice. I'm confirming the theory, Harry corrected. This will react visibly with any liquid containing polyjuice. And how do you plan to introduce it to his flask? I don't, Harry replied, finally looking up to meet her questioning gaze. I plan to create an atmospheric version that will react in proximity. A detection field rather than a direct countermeasure. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Clever. When deployed near him, any polyjuice on his person will emit a distinctive purple vapor, Harry finished. Visible only to those who have consumed the base solution first. Which means us, she deduced. Harry nodded, appreciating her quick grasp of his strategy. The real question is what we do with confirmation. Exposing him immediately might disrupt whatever plot involves Longbottom and me. You want to let the plan unfold? Daphne looked skeptical. That's dangerous. Controlled risk, Harry clarified. I need to understand the endgame. Who is orchestrating this, what they want with both Longbottom and me, and how it connects to Voldemort's potential return. Daphne was silent for a moment, watching him work. You've changed since you arrived, she observed finally. Harry glanced up. Have I? You were more closed when you first came. Calculating, always maintaining distance. She stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. You still calculate, but there's something else now. What would that be? Harry asked, genuinely curious about her perception. Investment, she decided. You came here with objectives, but now you're developing connections. With the study group. With Hogwarts itself. A slight hesitation. With me. The potion required Harry's attention at that precise moment, saving him from immediate response. He added the final ingredient, 3 strands of his own hair, and stirred clockwise until the solution turned silver. Connections are inevitable in any extended operation, he said finally, carefully measuring the completed potion into 2 small crystal vials. Is that all they are to you? Operational necessities? Harry set down his instruments and truly looked at her, Daphne Greengrass, who had become far more significant to his time at Hogwarts than he had anticipated. Her intelligence, perception, and unwavering self-possession had transformed her from a tactical alliance into something he wasn't entirely prepared to define. No, he admitted quietly. Not all. She accepted this limited acknowledgement with a nod. The Yule Ball is tomorrow night. It is. You need a partner, as a champion. I do. A hint of amusement touched her features. Are you going to make me ask you directly, Potter? For perhaps the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, Harry felt momentarily wrong-footed. Durmstrang's education covered many subjects, but the nuances of teenage social interactions had not been among them. Daphne Greengrass, he said, adopting formal tones that masked his uncertainty, would you accompany me to the Yule Ball? I thought you'd never ask, she replied with the ghost of a smile. Yes, I will. Harry handed her one of the crystal vials. 3 drops before we enter the Great Hall tomorrow night. The reaction field will extend approximately 2 meters around each of us. So business continues alongside pleasure, she noted, accepting the vial. Efficient. Practical, he corrected, echoing their earlier exchange. And, preferable. Her smile broadened slightly. Until tomorrow night, then. After she departed, Harry completed his cleanup with methodical precision, yet found his thoughts unusually scattered. Durmstrang had trained him to compartmentalize, to separate tactical objectives from personal considerations. Yet increasingly, these boundaries blurred where Daphne was concerned. A complication, certainly. But perhaps also an asset. Emotional investment need not be weakness if properly channeled. Tomorrow would test multiple strategies simultaneously. The Yule Ball transformed the great hall beyond recognition. Walls sparkled with silver frost while enchanted snow fell from the starlit ceiling, vanishing before reaching the dancers below. Ice sculptures adorned the room, and garlands of mistletoe and ivy crossed overhead. Harry waited at the entrance to the great hall, dressed in formal Durmstrang dress robes of deep crimson with black fur trim and silver fastenings. Unlike the British formal wear, Durmstrang's attire maintained practical elements, concealed wand holsters and freedom of movement for potential combat. When Daphne appeared at the top of the stairs, conversations around Harry momentarily paused. She wore robes of midnight blue that shimmered with subtle enchantment, her blonde hair elegantly arranged with silver ornaments that caught the light. She moved with the composed grace he'd come to associate with her, yet there was something different tonight, a softening of her usual reserved demeanor. "Impressed, Potter?" she asked as she reached him, noting his prolonged silence. Observant, he replied with a slight smile. "You look beautiful." "And you look dangerous," she returned, adjusting his collar slightly. "Did you take the potion?" 3 drops, as specified, Harry confirmed, offering his arm. "Shall we confirm our theory?" As champions, Harry and Daphne joined the procession into the great hall alongside Cedric with Cho Chang, Fleur with Roger Davies, and a surprisingly composed Neville with Hermione Granger, a pairing that had raised eyebrows throughout Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall directed the champions to the center of the hall for the opening dance. As they took their positions, Harry noted Moody standing near the refreshments, his magical eye scanning the crowd continuously. "He's by the punch bowl," Harry murmured to Daphne as the music began. "Can you see anything?" Daphne maintained her social smile as Harry led her into the first steps of the dance, another skill Durmstrang had surprisingly included in its curriculum, viewing formal events as potential operational environments. "Not yet," she replied quietly. "We need to get closer." Harry navigated them gradually across the dance floor, using the movement patterns to position themselves nearer to their target without appearing deliberate. Daphne followed his lead seamlessly, maintaining casual conversation for appearances. "Everyone's watching you," she noted. "The mysterious Durmstrang champion with the British heritage." "They're watching us," Harry corrected. "The Slytherin Ice Queen with the dark arts prodigy." She arched an eyebrow. "Is that how you see me? An Ice Queen?" "I see someone who uses that perception to her advantage," Harry replied. "Just as I use people's assumptions about Durmstrang." "Masks within masks," she mused. "We're well matched that way." As the dance brought them within range of Moody, Harry felt the potion he'd consumed activate, a slight warming sensation spreading across his skin. He kept his expression neutral, watching for the reaction. There, a faint purple mist only he and Daphne could see, emanating from Moody's flask as he took a swig. Their eyes met in silent confirmation. "Polyjuice," Daphne whispered as they turned through the next step. "Theory confirmed." "Now we need his true identity," Harry murmured. "The pattern of his movements, his interactions, he's fixated on Longbottom tonight." Indeed, the false Moody watched Neville with particular intensity as the Gryffindor danced with Hermione. Despite his apparent clumsiness in other contexts, Neville moved with surprising competence on the dance floor. "Crouch is missing," Daphne observed as they continued dancing. "He was supposed to judge the tournament, but Weatherby is here in his place." "Weatherby?" "Percy Weasley," she clarified. "Fudge keeps calling him Weatherby. He's standing in for Crouch, who's reportedly ill." "Convenient," Harry noted. Supporting your theory about Barty Crouch Jr., as the opening dance concluded, they moved to the edge of the floor, maintaining observation of the imposter while appearing engaged in normal ball activities. Harry procured drinks, carefully selecting sealed butterbeer bottles rather than punch that could be tampered with. Your security precautions never cease, Daphne noted with amusement as he checked the bottles. Habit, Harry replied unapologetically. Durmstrang's combat instructor poisoned our food regularly to build immunity and awareness. Charming educational technique. Effective, Harry countered. I haven't been successfully poisoned since third year. The evening progressed with calculated movements. Harry fulfilled his champion's obligations, dancing with Madame Maxime, a diplomatic courtesy, Professor McGonagall, who used the opportunity to quietly express concerns about his study group, and even Hermione Granger, a strategic alliance-building exercise that raised eyebrows throughout the hall. Between these social maneuvers, he maintained surveillance on the false Moody, cataloging his interactions and movements. The imposter's attention remained divided between Harry and Longbottom, with occasional intense conversations with Severus Snape that appeared contentious. He's agitated tonight, Daphne observed as they reconvened after Harry's diplomatic duties. Taking more frequent drinks from his flask. The schedule is accelerating, Harry agreed. Whatever he's planning, it's approaching execution phase. As midnight neared, Harry noticed the impostor slip away from the Great Hall. With a significant glance at Daphne, he guided her toward one of the side exits. Reconnaissance, she asked quietly. Limited observation only, Harry confirmed. No engagement. They followed at a discreet distance, Harry using sensory enhancement techniques to track the imposter's magical signature through the corridors. The trail led toward the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, but then unexpectedly diverted toward the dungeons. Harry and Daphne concealed themselves behind a suit of armor as the false Moody limped down a rarely used passage, finally stopping before a blank stone wall. After checking for observers, his magical eye scanning in all directions, he tapped a complex pattern and murmured words too distant to hear. The wall shimmered and revealed a hidden door that the impostor quickly entered. Secret room, Daphne whispered. Not on any Hogwarts floor plan I've seen. Likely where he's keeping the real Moody, Harry deduced. He'd need continuous access for fresh samples. The implication hung grimly between them. Polyjuice required parts of the person being impersonated, typically hair, but for long-term deception, fresh samples worked better. Should we alert Dumbledore? Daphne asked. Harry considered this. Not yet. We need more information first, concrete identity confirmation. Otherwise, the impostor could escape, or worse, accelerate whatever plan involves Longbottom and me. So we continue observing? For now, Harry confirmed. But with heightened vigilance. As they turned to leave, a scuffing sound from the adjacent corridor froze them in place. Harry pushed Daphne gently behind him, drawing his wand with practiced speed. Who's there? He called softly, infusing his voice with a subtle compulsion charm that encouraged response. Potter? Longbottom's voice came nervously from the shadows. Is that you? Neville stepped into view, still wearing his formal robes from the ball. His expression showed confusion and wariness. What are you doing here, Longbottom? Harry asked, not lowering his wand. I saw Moody leaving the ball, Neville explained hesitantly. He's been acting strangely lately. After helping me with the first task, he keeps asking weird questions about you. Harry exchanged a significant look with Daphne. What kind of questions? About your study group. Whether you've mentioned anything about you-know-who. If you've shown interest in the graveyard in Little Hangleton. Harry's alertness sharpened. Little Hangleton? Yeah, he brought it up out of nowhere, Neville continued. Asked if you'd mentioned your parents being buried there. I told him your parents are in Godric's Hollow, everyone knows that. Little Hangleton, Daphne murmured. Why would he connect that to you? Harry's mind raced through possibilities. It's significant somehow. Longbottom, has Moody discussed the third task with you at all? Neville nodded. He mentioned it would be a maze, and that he's been asked to provide some of the obstacles. Said I should keep practicing the spells he's been teaching me. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. The imposter was preparing both Harry and Neville for specific challenges, guiding their training toward the third task. "Listen carefully," Harry said, lowering his voice. "The man you know as Moody isn't Moody. He's using Polyjuice Potion to impersonate him." Neville's eyes widened. "What? But he's been teaching all year. Dumbledore hired him." "Dumbledore hired the real Moody," Daphne clarified. "This imposter intercepted him before he arrived at Hogwarts. We don't know his true identity yet," Harry continued, "but he's guiding both of us towards something specific in the third task. Possibly involving this graveyard he mentioned." "But why?" Neville asked, his face pale. "What would anyone want with me? You're the boy who lived." "That's what we need to determine," Harry replied. "For now, continue as normal. Don't let him know you suspect anything. But be extremely careful what information you share with him." Neville swallowed hard. "Should we tell Dumbledore?" "Not without conclusive evidence," Harry decided. "The imposter is well positioned and clearly has contingency plans. A premature move might make the situation more dangerous." "I don't like this," Neville said, showing unexpected backbone. "If there's a Death Eater at Hogwarts, there almost certainly is," Harry cut him off. "But exposing him without understanding his full plan leaves us vulnerable to unknown elements." Before they could debate further, a distant sound of footsteps caused all three to tense. "The imposter's returning," Harry whispered. "We need to leave. Separately, different routes." Daphne nodded, quickly mapping options. "Neville, take the passage behind the tapestry 2 corridors over, it leads to the ground floor near the greenhouses. We'll create a diversion if needed," Harry added, drawing his second wand. "Go." Neville hesitated only briefly before nodding and disappearing down the indicated corridor. Harry and Daphne took the opposite direction, moving silently through shadow-filled passages until they reached the relative safety of the main halls. "The plot is accelerating," Harry observed as they approached the great hall where the ball continued. "Little Hangleton, I need to research that location immediately." "The library will be closed tonight," Daphne noted. "Not to a champion with a compelling tournament-related research need," Harry countered. "And if that fails, there are other ways to access information." They paused at the entrance to the Great Hall, the sounds of music and celebration a surreal counterpoint to their discoveries. "We should make an appearance," Daphne suggested. "Maintain normalcy." Harry nodded agreement, but before they could enter, he touched her arm lightly. "Thank you. Your involvement has been invaluable." She studied him for a moment. "Is that all it's been, Potter? Valuable intelligence gathering?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken complexities. Harry was acutely aware of how Daphne had become far more than a tactical alliance. She had become someone whose insights he trusted, whose presence he valued beyond strategic considerations. In answer, he leaned forward and kissed her, briefly, gently, a gesture entirely absent from Durmstrang's extensive training regimen. "No," he said simply as he drew back. "Not all." A smile touched her lips, not her usual controlled expression, but something more genuine. "Good. Because I'd hate to think I dressed this formally for mere intelligence gathering." They rejoined the ball, maintaining the appearance of normal celebration while their minds processed the night's discoveries. The evening had provided critical intelligence, confirmed suspected threats, and unexpectedly, deepened personal connections Harry hadn't planned for in his original mission parameters. Adaptability, his Durmstrang instructors had always emphasized, was the ultimate survival skill. Tonight had certainly tested that principle on multiple fronts. January brought bitter cold and the second Triwizard tasks looming pressure. Harry divided his time between tournament preparation, continued surveillance of the false Moody, and discreet continuation of his study group, now meeting in smaller clusters with rotating leadership to avoid ministry detection. His research into Little Hangleton had yielded disturbing connections. The small village was home to a manor once owned by a Muggle family named Riddle, all murdered mysteriously 50 years earlier. More significantly, the neighboring wizard hamlet of Greater Hangleton contained historical records of the Gaunt family, direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin and the maternal lineage of Tom Marvolo Riddle, Lord Voldemort himself. His family home, Daphne concluded when Harry shared these findings in the privacy of the Room of Requirement. But why would the impostor want to direct you or Neville there? Symbolic significance, perhaps, Harry suggested, or practical necessity. Many powerful rituals require locations connected to the participant's heritage. Rituals like resurrection, she said quietly. Harry nodded grimly. Exactly like resurrection. Their investigation of the false Moody continued with calculated caution. Through careful observation and strategic positioning during defense classes, they'd confirmed the impostor maintained a hidden room in the dungeons where the real Moody was likely imprisoned. However, the security measures around this location made direct infiltration prohibitively dangerous without compromising their cover. Meanwhile, Harry prepared methodically for the second task. When the Golden Eggs clue revealed an underwater challenge in the Black Lake, he developed multiple contingency plans, a Durmstrang principle that had served him well in the first task. The morning of February 24th dawned cold and windy. Harry arrived at the lake's edge wearing modified Durmstrang swimwear beneath his uniform, a wetsuit-like garment inscribed with protective and enhancement runes similar to those he'd used against the dragon, but calibrated for underwater operation. The stand surrounding the lake filled with spectators despite the biting cold. As Bagman explained the task, retrieving what had been taken from the merpeople's village within 1 hour, Harry scanned the crowd, noting Daphne's absence with sudden concern. "Welcome to the second task," Bagman announced. "Our champions must recover what has been taken from them, held at the bottom of the lake by the merpeople. They have precisely 1 hour. Harry's concern crystallized into certainty. The hostages wouldn't be objects, they would be people. People significant to each champion. Scanning the platform, he confirmed his theory. Cho Chang, known to be dating Cedric. Gabrielle Delacour, Fleur's sister. No obvious connection for Longbottom, though Harry suspected Hermione Granger based on their growing friendship. And for him, Daphne. The realization triggered something primal and protective that Durmstrang's training hadn't entirely suppressed. As the whistle blew, Harry enacted his primary strategy. Rather than immediate submersion like the other champions, he knelt at the water's edge, drawing all 3 of his wands simultaneously, a technique that drew gasps from the crowd and alarmed looks from the judges. Aqua Spirans Maxima, he intoned, touching his primary wand to his throat while using his secondary wands to create a complex runic pattern in the air before him. Blue light suffused his neck and chest as the enchantment took effect, a modified breathing charm that would extract oxygen directly from water. Next, he cast a series of enhancement spells using all 3 wands in precise coordination, Corporis Temperaturis, to regulate body temperature, Visus Aquaticus, for underwater vision, and finally, Propulsio Aquatica, for enhanced swimming speed. Only then did Harry remove his outer uniform, revealing the rune-inscribed swimwear beneath. The markings began glowing faintly blue as they activated in contact with water. Potter is using multiple wands for what appears to be an extremely complex preparation sequence, Bagman announced excitedly. Quite unlike the approaches of our other champions. Indeed, Cedric and Fleur had used bubblehead charms, while Longbottom had apparently consumed gillyweed, an effective if straightforward solution. Harry dove into the lake with perfect form, the propulsion charm immediately accelerating him far beyond normal human swimming capability. The water was frigid but his temperature regulation spell maintained his core warmth, while his enhanced vision penetrated the murky depths with surprising clarity. He moved through the water with predatory efficiency, following his magical senses toward the strongest concentration of magical signatures, presumably the Merpeople village. Unlike the other champions who swam near the surface initially, Harry went deep immediately, avoiding the worst of the Grindylow-infested kelp forests. 20 minutes into the task, Harry encountered the first significant obstacle, a swarm of water demons that emerged from a rocky outcropping, their long fingers grasping and sharp teeth gleaming in the dim underwater light. Rather than engaging directly, Harry executed a complex wand movement, creating a swirling vortex around himself. Aqua Virago. The water demon swarm scattered, unable to penetrate the miniature whirlpool surrounding him. Maintaining the vortex with his secondary wand, Harry continued toward the Merepeople village, occasionally adjusting his course based on magical emanations he detected. When the singing voices of the Merepeople finally reached him, he followed them to a strange underwater settlement, crude stone dwellings covered in algae, surrounded by Merepeople carrying spears and tridents. In the village center, 4 hostages floated unconsciously, tethered to a massive statue of a merperson. Harry identified them immediately: Cho, Gabrielle, Hermione, and as he'd suspected, Daphne. Each drifted in suspended animation, preserved by magic but clearly helpless. Harry assessed the situation with trained precision. No other champions had arrived yet. The Merepeople watched him warily but made no move to interfere. The binding spell on the hostages appeared complex, designed to release only when the specific champion retrieved their person. Swimming directly to Daphne, Harry examined her restraints, magical ropes that would likely resist standard cutting spells. Rather than attempting to sever them, he analyzed their magical signature, identifying the specific frequency of the binding enchantment. Resonant I am identifico, he cast wordlessly, his wand tip glowing softly as it mapped the spell's structure. Once identified, he cast the countercharm with precise movements, vinculum salvo personalis. The ropes loosened immediately, recognizing Harry's magical signature as the designated champion. He gathered Daphne carefully in his arms, but hesitated before ascending. No sign of the other champions, and time had to be running short. Gabrielle Delacour looked particularly vulnerable, younger and smaller than the others. Remembering Fleur's partial incapacitation in the first task, Harry made a tactical decision. Using his third wand, he cast a specialized detection charm to identify potential monitoring spells. Finding several, he carefully neutralized them with targeted countermagic before approaching Gabrielle's restraints. The Merepeople moved forward threateningly, tridents raised. Only one, a merman gurgled in a barely comprehensible underwater voice. Harry responded in Mermish, one of several non-human languages Durmstrang taught for practical magical operations. His pronunciation was rough but functional: the small one's champion may be prevented from reaching her. I claim responsibility. The Merepeople hesitated, surprised by his knowledge of their language. Taking advantage of their confusion, Harry quickly cast the same unbinding spell on Gabrielle's restraints, gathering her small form with his free arm. Now burdened with 2 unconscious hostages, Harry needed to modify his ascent strategy. He holstered 2 of his wands, keeping his primary ready for defense, and cast a final spell before departing, Ascensio Trium Corporalis. A bubble of magic encapsulated all 3 of them as Harry kicked powerfully upward. They rose with accelerating speed, bypassing the waiting water demons and kelp forests through a direct vertical path. Breaking the surface precisely at the 1-hour mark, Harry maintained the bubble charm until reaching the platform, where officials rushed forward to receive the still unconscious hostages. Remarkable! Bagman shouted as the crowd erupted. Harry Potter returns exactly at the time limit with 2 hostages. His own, Miss Greengrass, and the young Miss Delacour. Extraordinary magic and unprecedented heroism. Medical staff immediately attended to the awakening hostages. Daphne regained consciousness quickly, coughing out water before focusing on Harry with questioning eyes. "You came for me," she said simply. "Of course," he replied, helping her to her feet. Before they could speak further, Fleur Delacour rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her sister who was now spluttering awake. "You saved her," she exclaimed, turning to Harry with naked gratitude. "The Grindylows, they attacked, I could not pass, Gabrielle would have," she broke off, overcome with emotion, then impulsively kissed Harry on both cheeks. "Thank you." The judges conferred urgently as Cedric surfaced with Cho, just outside the time limit. Long minutes passed with no sign of Longbottom, until finally, well beyond the hour mark, he emerged, dragging an unconscious Hermione. Medical staff rushed to assist them as Longbottom collapsed on the platform, exhausted but successful despite his tardiness. The judges have reached their decision. Bagman announced finally. Considering the exceptional circumstances, scores are as follows: for Miss Fleur Delacour, who demonstrated excellent use of the bubblehead charm but was prevented from completing the task by Grindylows, 25 points. Polite applause followed as Fleur shook her head, still clutching her sister. For Mr. Cedric Diggory, who also used the bubblehead charm effectively and returned with his hostage 1 minute outside the time limit, 40 points. The Hufflepuffs cheered enthusiastically. For Mr. Neville Longbottom, who used gillyweed to great effect but returned last, well outside the time limit, 35 points, reflecting exceptional moral fiber in ensuring his hostage's safety despite the stated time constraints. Gryffindors roared approval, many looking surprised but delighted by Neville's unexpected showing. And finally, for Mr. Harry Potter. Bagman paused dramatically, who demonstrated extraordinary magical skill with multiple enchantments, returned exactly at the time limit, and rescued not only his own hostage but another champion's as well, 45 points. The Durmstrang delegation erupted in controlled approval, not the wild cheering of Hogwarts houses but the measured acknowledgement of expected excellence. Karkaroff looked supremely satisfied, while Dumbledore studied Harry with thoughtful intensity. This places Mr. Potter in first place overall with 92 points. Bagman continued. Followed by Mr. Diggory with 80 points, Mr. Longbottom with 73, and Miss Delacour with 61. As medical staff distributed warming potions and blankets, Harry found himself surrounded by admirers and questioners from all three schools. He answered their inquiries with measured responses, neither boasting nor diminishing his actions, while scanning the crowd for potential threats, another Durmstrang habit that never fully deactivated. The false Moody stood at the platform's edge, magical eye fixed on Harry with unsettling intensity. Their gazes met briefly, and Harry detected something beyond the impostor's usual calculation, a flicker of concern, as if Harry's performance had complicated some aspect of his plans. Good. Later, wrapped in thick Durmstrang cloaks as they walked back toward the castle, Daphne slipped her hand into Harry's, an uncharacteristically public display of connection. You could have finished first easily, she observed quietly. Taking Gabrielle slowed you down. It was the right decision, Harry replied simply. Tactically risky, she noted. But strategically advantageous. You've gained Fleur's gratitude and demonstrated values beyond mere competition. Harry smiled faintly. Are you suggesting I calculated a moral decision for political advantage? Didn't you? She raised an eyebrow. He considered this. 6 years ago, when he'd first arrived at Durmstrang, perhaps that would have been true, every action evaluated solely for strategic benefit. But something had shifted during his time at Hogwarts. No, he admitted. I saw a child in danger and acted accordingly. Daphne studied him with that perceptive gaze that seemed to see beneath his carefully constructed layers. You continue to surprise me, Potter. Good, he replied. Predictability is a tactical weakness. She laughed softly. And there's the Durmstrang training reasserting itself. As they reached the castle entrance, Harry noticed Dumbledore waiting, apparently casually, by the great oak doors. It seems the headmaster wishes to speak with you, Daphne murmured. I'll see you at dinner. Harry nodded, squeezing her hand briefly before they parted. He approached Dumbledore with measured steps, maintaining a respectful but guarded demeanor. An impressive performance today, Harry, the headmaster said, his blue eyes twinkling though his expression remained evaluative. Your magical abilities continue to exceed expectations. Thank you, headmaster. I was particularly intrigued by your decision to rescue young Miss Delacour, Dumbledore continued. Not a choice I would have expected from Durmstrang training, which typically emphasizes individual achievement. Harry recognized the subtle probe. Durmstrang teaches practical magic, headmaster. Recognizing when protecting others serves a greater purpose than following arbitrary rules is entirely practical. Indeed. Dumbledore's eyes held a new interest. And what greater purpose did you see today? A child was in danger, Harry replied simply. No purpose required beyond that. Something shifted in Dumbledore's expression, a softening, perhaps even a flicker of hope. Your mother would have made the same choice, he said quietly. Lily always put others' safety before rules or personal advantage. The unexpected mention of his mother caught Harry off guard. Dumbledore rarely spoke of his parents directly, preferring abstract references to legacy or sacrifice. You knew her well? Harry asked before he could stop himself. I did, Dumbledore confirmed. Both your parents. They were exceptional people, Harry, not just in magical talent, but in character. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. I see more of them in you than I initially expected. The observation carried layers of meaning, an acknowledgement that Dumbledore had anticipated Durmstrang's influence to overwhelm Harry's inherited qualities, and recognition that this hadn't entirely occurred. People are shaped by more than their education, Harry replied carefully. Durmstrang taught me magical techniques, but how I apply them remains my choice. A profound observation, Dumbledore nodded. And perhaps the most important distinction between magic that heals and magic that harms. He gestured toward the Great Hall. I believe a celebration awaits the champions. We shouldn't keep your admirers waiting. As Harry turned to go, Dumbledore added, One moment, Harry. I wonder if you might indulge an old man's curiosity. The multiple wand technique you employed, it's quite unusual in British magical practice. Durmstrang considers single wand limitation an artificial constraint, Harry explained. Different wands channel different magical frequencies more efficiently. Using multiple wands simultaneously allows for more complex spell interactions. Fascinating, Dumbledore mused. Though requiring remarkable magical control, I imagine. It does, Harry acknowledged. Few students master it beyond basic applications. Yet you demonstrate considerable proficiency, Dumbledore observed. Your instructors must be quite proud of your progress. The comment seemed innocuous, but Harry detected the underlying question: how had he advanced so quickly in techniques that typically require decades to master? I had excellent motivation to learn, Harry replied with deliberate ambiguity. And Durmstrang rewards exceptional dedication. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Indeed. Well, I've kept you from your well-earned celebration long enough. Congratulations again on your performance today, Harry. As Harry entered the Great Hall, greeted by cheers from students of all three schools, he reflected on the conversation. Dumbledore was probing for information, not just about Harry's magical abilities but about his internal moral compass. The headmaster was reassessing him, perhaps even reconsidering initial assumptions about Durmstrang's influence. The implications of this shift could be significant for Harry's long-term objectives at Hogwarts. The celebration continued throughout dinner, with even Slytherins who had initially viewed Harry with suspicion now claiming proximity to Potter's British connections. Harry maintained polite engagement while continuously scanning for the false Moody, who had pointedly absented himself from the festivities. Later that evening, as Harry returned to the Durmstrang ship, Victor fell into step beside him. You impressed them today, the Bulgarian observed. Even those who feared your magic now speak of it with admiration. Fear and admiration often coexist, Harry replied. The British magical community fears what it doesn't understand but admires power it wishes to possess. Victor nodded. Karkaroff is pleased. He speaks of your performance as vindication of Durmstrang methods. Of course he does, Harry said dryly. My success serves his political agenda. And does it serve yours? Victor asked shrewdly. Harry considered the question as they approached the gangplank to the ship. My agenda is more complex than Karkaroff realizes. I suspected as much, Victor replied with a knowing look. You use Durmstrang as Durmstrang uses you, a mutually beneficial arrangement, but not one of true loyalty. True loyalty is earned, not demanded, Harry observed. Victor studied him thoughtfully. You have changed since coming here. The Hogwarts girl, Greengrass, she influences you. Everyone is influenced by their connections, Harry deflected. Perhaps, Victor conceded. But be cautious. Karkaroff notices these changes too. He begins to question whether you will remain aligned with Durmstrang's interests when the tournament concludes. The warning was clear. Karkaroff had invested years in shaping Harry into a powerful symbol of Durmstrang's superiority. Any deviation from that role would not be viewed favorably. My appreciation for your concern, Harry replied formally. I remain committed to our agreement. Victor nodded, seemingly satisfied, though his eyes held lingering doubt. The third task approaches. Rumors suggest a maze of considerable danger. All mazes have solutions, Harry said, if one understands the principles of navigation. As they boarded the ship, Harry reflected on the multiple layers of manipulation surrounding him, Karkaroff's political ambitions, Dumbledore's strategic concerns, and the false Moody's mysterious agenda involving both him and Longbottom. The third task would bring these competing interests to their inevitable collision. Harry needed to be prepared not just for the official challenges of the tournament, but for the hidden games playing out beneath its surface. The chessboard was set, the pieces in motion. The endgame approached. March brought unseasonable storms that lashed Hogwarts with driving rain and howling winds. Students hurried between classes huddled beneath weather-repelling charms, while the Durmstrang ship rode the increasingly violent swells of the Black Lake like a restless beast. Harry used the inclement weather as cover for intensified preparation. The room of requirement had become his primary training ground, transformed by his needs into environments ranging from labyrinthine mazes to combat arenas. His study group continued to meet in rotating small clusters, each developing specialized skills under his guidance. During one such session focused on defensive counter curses, Hermione Granger approached Harry after the others had departed. I need to speak with you, she said with uncharacteristic directness. About Neville. Harry holstered his wand, giving her his full attention. What about him? He told me about Moody, or whoever's impersonating him, she continued in a low voice. I've been watching, and you're right. The timing of his polyjuice doses is perfectly consistent, hourly, without fail. You've been counting, Harry observed, impressed despite himself. Of course I have, she replied as if it were obvious. And I've found something else. In the library's restricted section, there's a book called Magical Rituals of Resurrection. It was recently accessed, the library log shows Professor Moody checked it out 3 weeks ago. Harry's interest sharpened. How did you access the restricted section logs? She waved this away impatiently. I help Madame Pants with cataloging. That's not important. What matters is that I found references to rituals requiring 3 specific components: bone of the father, flesh of the servant, and blood of the enemy. Enemies, plural, Harry corrected, his mind racing through implications. If both Longbottom and I are targets, the ritual may require blood from both of us. That's what I thought, Hermione agreed. The book mentioned that certain resurrection rituals can be strengthened by using blood from magical opposites or connected individuals. Connected by prophecy, Harry murmured, then caught himself. Hermione's eyes widened. Prophecy? What prophecy? It's not relevant right now, Harry deflected smoothly. What matters is understanding how the imposter plans to obtain our blood. The third task, Hermione said with certainty. It's the perfect opportunity, champions separated in a maze, encountering various dangers. No one would question injuries. Harry nodded, having reached the same conclusion. We need to identify the imposter conclusively. If we're correct about Barty Crouch Jr., there may be patterns in his behavior we can exploit, habits or knowledge specific to him rather than Moody. I've already started researching, Hermione confirmed, pulling a small notebook from her robes. Everything the real Auror Moody was known for versus behaviors this imposter exhibits. There are discrepancies. Harry reviewed her meticulous notes with growing appreciation for her methodical mind. This is excellent work, Granger. Why are you sharing it with me rather than Dumbledore? She hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully. Because Dumbledore might act immediately to protect the school, which could endanger Neville if the imposter has contingency plans. And because. She took a deep breath, because despite your Durmstrang background and questionable magical practices, you seem genuinely concerned with protecting Neville, not just yourself. Harry studied her with new interest. You've been observing me as well. Of course I have, she repeated. You're an anomaly, a Durmstrang student with proven dark arts knowledge who nonetheless demonstrates ethical boundaries. You're helping students from all houses learn defensive magic. And you rescued Gabrielle Delacour despite the competitive disadvantage. Your assessment is surprisingly accurate, Harry acknowledged. Don't sound so shocked, Hermione replied with mild indignation. Some of us at Hogwarts are capable of nuanced thinking beyond dark equals evil. For the first time in their interactions, Harry smiled genuinely. I stand corrected, Granger. Your assistance is welcome. They spent the next hour comparing notes and developing detection strategies to confirm the imposter's identity. Hermione's encyclopedic knowledge of magical theory complemented Harry's practical experience with concealment countermeasures, resulting in several viable approaches. One final question, Hermione said as they concluded their planning. If we confirm it's Crouch Jr., what then? Your Slytherin partner seems convinced we should continue monitoring rather than exposing him. Daphne understands the value of controlling known variables, Harry explained. Exposing the imposter prematurely might trigger contingency plans we're unaware of, or allow other agents to step in. Better to track his movements and prepare countermeasures for the third task. Hermione frowned. That's dangerously close to using Neville as bait. No, Harry corrected firmly. It's acknowledging that Neville is already targeted and ensuring he has protection when the attempt occurs. Immediate exposure doesn't guarantee safety, it only changes the nature of the threat. She considered this with obvious reluctance. I don't like it. Neither do I, Harry admitted. But I've been trained to prioritize effective outcomes over comfortable ones. That's very Durmstrang of you, she observed. Yes, Harry agreed without apology. It is. Their unlikely alliance established, Harry returned to the Durmstrang ship, where he found Karkaroff waiting in his private cabin, an unprecedented breach of student privacy that immediately triggered Harry's caution. Headmaster, Harry acknowledged, subtly checking his wand holsters. This is unexpected. Indeed. Karkaroff closed the door with a flick of his wand. I find myself concerned about your extracurricular activities, Potter. My tournament preparation is comprehensive, Harry replied neutrally. I speak not of the tournament, Karkaroff said, his voice lowering. But of your investigations into certain staff members, your growing network of Hogwarts alliances, and most concerning, your research into Little Hangleton. Harry maintained an impassive expression, though internally he reassessed his operational security. Karkaroff had better intelligence sources than anticipated. Knowledge is preparation, Harry said simply. Isn't that what Durmstrang taught me? Karkaroff studied him with calculating eyes. You believe the Dark Lord will return. Don't you? Harry countered. Is that not why you've been increasingly agitated? The darkening mark on your arm tells its own story, Headmaster. Karkaroff's hand unconsciously moved to his left forearm. You know about the mark. I know many things, Harry replied. Including that you cultivated me as a potential weapon against Voldemort's return, insurance against his retribution for your testimony after the First War. A tense silence filled the cabin as years of unspoken calculations surfaced between them. You've always been too perceptive, Karkaroff said finally. Yes, I saw potential advantage in training the boy who lived. The political currency alone was valuable. But if he returns? He shook his head. The game changes entirely. And now you fear I've developed objectives independent of yours, Harry concluded. Karkaroff neither confirmed nor denied this. The third task approaches. Your victory would bring unprecedented prestige to Durmstrang. Is that still your primary concern? Harry asked pointedly. My concern, Karkaroff replied with sudden intensity, is survival. The Dark Lord does not forgive betrayal. When he returns, if he returns, those who abandoned him will be hunted mercilessly. Unless they have protection, Harry observed. Or leverage. Karkaroff's eyes narrowed. What leverage could possibly matter against his power? Knowledge of his methods, Harry suggested. Preparation for his tactics. Perhaps even, an alternative path forward for those caught between opposing forces. The implication hung between them, Harry offering potential alliance rather than abandonment, though on his terms rather than Karkaroff's. After long consideration, Karkaroff nodded slightly. We will discuss this further after the tournament concludes. Until then, I expect your full commitment to Durmstrang's victory. Of course, headmaster, Harry agreed smoothly. When Karkaroff departed, Harry reinforced his privacy wards and conducted a thorough sweep for surveillance charms. Finding 3 new monitoring spells, he neutralized them with practiced efficiency. The conversation confirmed what he had long suspected. Karkaroff's interest in Harry had always been self-serving, a calculated investment against future threats. Now that Voldemort's return seemed increasingly likely, the Durmstrang headmaster was reassessing his position, weighing options for survival. Harry had no illusions about Karkaroff's loyalty. The man would align himself with whichever side offered better protection. For now, maintaining their arrangement served Harry's purposes, but contingency plans would be necessary. The game board continued to complicate as the third task approached. April arrived with warming temperatures and increasing tension. The Triwizard Maze had begun growing on the Quidditch pitch, Professor Sprout and her students tending the rapidly expanding hedges with specialized magical fertilizers. Harry observed their work from a distance, mentally mapping the maze's developing structure. Already he could identify choke points and potential ambush locations where the false Moody might place specific obstacles tailored to Harry and Neville's predicted paths. Analyzing already? Daphne asked as she joined him on the overlooking hill. The task is still weeks away. Preparation eliminates variables, Harry replied, a long-ingrained Durmstrang principle. Speaking of preparation, she continued, handing him a sealed parchment, our confirmation came through. Harry broke the seal and reviewed the contents, ministry records Daphne had obtained through family connections, documenting Barty Crouch Jr.'s original arrest and supposed death in Azkaban. Interesting, he noted. The death certificate is signed by his father alone, with no secondary medical confirmation. And his body was released for private burial rather than standard prisoner interment. Highly irregular, Daphne agreed. The elder Crouch had the authority to bypass normal protocols, especially given his son's high-profile status. So Crouch Sr. helped his son escape, Harry concluded. Then kept him hidden, presumably under the Imperius curse based on his recent behavior. Until Junior somehow broke free and reversed their positions, Daphne finished. Now father is imprisoned or dead, while son impersonates Moody to orchestrate whatever ritual he's planning. Harry considered these confirmations against their accumulated intelligence. Hermione's research suggests the ritual requires Bone of the Father as a key component. Little Hangleton contains the Riddle family graveyard. So the third task will somehow transport you and Neville there, Daphne reasoned. A portkey, perhaps. That would explain why Crouch has been influencing the task design. Most likely, Harry agreed. We need to, he broke off as he spotted Neville hurrying toward them, face flushed with exertion. Potter. Neville called. Something's happened. Crouch Sr. was just found at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, disoriented, babbling about warning Dumbledore. Harry exchanged an alarmed look with Daphne. Where is he now? Hospital wing, Neville replied. Dumbledore and fake Moody are with him. This accelerates everything, Daphne said urgently. If Crouch Sr. escaped captivity, Junior will have to act sooner than planned, Harry finished, already moving toward the castle. The timeline just compressed significantly. They reached the hospital wing to find it cordoned off by prefects blocking student access. Percy Weasley stood importantly at the entrance, directing people away. "No visitors," he announced pompously. "Official ministry business underway." Harry approached directly. "I need to speak with Headmaster Dumbledore immediately. It concerns the tournament and Barty Crouch. Any information about Mr. Crouch should be directed to me as his assistant," Percy replied stiffly. "I am fully authorized to. This concerns his son," Harry interrupted in a low voice. "Barty Crouch Jr. Still alive and currently inside that room with Dumbledore." Percy's face drained of color. That's impossible. Junior died in Azkaban years ago." "Did he?" Harry pressed. "Or did his father use his ministry authority to fake his death and secretly release him?" "Check the records, Weasley. The death certificate lacks standard verification." Indecision flashed across Percy's features. "I can't just," a sudden commotion from inside the hospital wing interrupted him, shouting, the crash of breaking glass, and what sounded like spell fire. Harry drew his wand instantly, pushing past Percy before the prefect could react. The scene inside confirmed their worst fears. Crouch Sr. lay motionless on a hospital bed, clearly dead. Dumbledore stood with wand drawn, facing the false Moody whose magical disguise was fluctuating visibly, patches of his face shifting between Moody's scarred features and a younger, manic countenance. "It's too late, Dumbledore," the impostor shouted, backing toward the window. "The Dark Lord rises tonight." Spotting Harry in the doorway, the impostor's expression contorted with rage and triumph. "Potter. Perfect timing. My master will be pleased to use your blood for his resurrection." Harry raised his wand, but before he could cast, the false Moody shattered the window with a blasting curse and leapt through the opening, transforming mid-air into a crow that winged rapidly toward the forbidden forest. "Animagus," Dumbledore murmured, lowering his wand. "Unexpected." "Headmaster," Harry said urgently, "that was Barty Crouch Jr. He's planning to resurrect Voldemort using a ritual in Little Hangleton Graveyard." Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes fixed on Harry with new intensity. "You've been investigating." "Yes," Harry acknowledged without apology. "The tournament was manipulated from the beginning to deliver specific champions to a predetermined location, likely through a portkey in the third task maze." "How long have you known this?" Dumbledore asked, his tone neutral but his magic pulsing with barely controlled power. "We've been gathering evidence for months," Daphne answered from behind Harry. "Confirming the impostor's identity and objectives before acting." Dumbledore absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "I see. And you chose not to bring these concerns to me because..." "Because premature exposure risked triggering contingency plans before we understood the full scope of the threat," Harry explained. "Now circumstances have forced acceleration." "Indeed they have," Dumbledore agreed grimly, glancing at Crouch Sr.'s body. "Barty appears to have killed his father when he could no longer maintain control over him." "We need to cancel the third task," Neville suggested nervously from the doorway. "That would be unwise," Harry countered. "Junior has just demonstrated his willingness to abandon established plans when compromised. If we remove his controlled scenario, he'll create another, potentially more dangerous and less predictable." "You suggest allowing the task to proceed?" Dumbledore asked, studying Harry with evaluative interest. "With modifications," Harry confirmed. "We know his objective and methods now. That gives us the opportunity to prepare countermeasures and potentially turn his trap against him." Dumbledore considered this strategy with obvious reservation. "You propose using yourself and Mr. Longbottom as bait." "I propose controlling the battlefield rather than ceding it," Harry corrected. "Junior expects us to be unprepared." "We won't be." A tense silence fell as Dumbledore weighed options, his aged features reflecting the burden of command decisions. Very well, he said finally. We will proceed with appropriate precautions. But first, we must address immediate security concerns. Minerva, he called to McGonagall who had just arrived, please inform the staff that Alastor Moody was an impostor who has now fled the grounds. Security protocols are to be implemented immediately. As McGonagall departed with this urgent message, Dumbledore turned to Harry, Daphne, and Neville. You three will accompany me to my office. We have much to discuss regarding what you know and how we proceed. The situation had irreversibly escalated. The false Moody, now confirmed as Barty Crouch Jr., had abandoned subterfuge for direct action. Whatever ritual he planned for Voldemort's resurrection would now proceed under emergency conditions rather than the controlled scenario of the tournament. Which meant greater danger, but also greater opportunity for those prepared to counter it. The endgame had begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.